There we go.
Yeah, we're in the back. Arthur said, good to see you.
It's working now. And you're recording. Not back here.
Brad and I'll catch you in the spirit.
One of your subdivisions in the road is really nice.
I haven't seen you in a long
Got a
time.
guy here.
Yeah, no, I don't know.
We just finished the border zoning appeals
The two, I
meeting
think, before that.
downtown.
So,
So I ran home and grabbed
flip that switch.
I will.
a quick bite, cup of
was actually
tea.
afraid I was
He
gonna miss
do
this
the same, I
You
think.
had to run home, take care of dogs and horses.
I think we're it.
In the world, we get another one. Oh, it's about the pipelines. Federal pipeline safety improvement order. Natural gas awareness.
Our chairperson.
The man.
Good for you.
Maytag repairman.
He is the man.
Maytag repairman.
He's been practicing for years. I don't remember it's been a long time. I can remember you doing
No,
it.
Rita's been pretty good about being here. Have to go all the way back to when Bob was here. I don't think it's going to be my 15-minute record.
No. I told my wife when I get home by 11, I'll feel good.
Oh, I feel ecstatic. Oh, I feel absolutely ecstatic if we got out of here by 11.
Yes, I need. They're not coming home.
There's a traffic light last time I was there.
That be on right here.
There's no signal.
Yeah. Yeah.
That has nothing to do with it.
Hey, Mr. Mayor, how are you? All right.
All right, guys. Thank you.
We'll move up. Yeah.
Paid a lot more than they do. It makes us
The cover's gonna wear out before the tab does, I'm sure.
Yeah, there wasn't a place to park. I think I got the last spot. Yeah, so they can see.
Can they see it?
How I found out about one of the agenda items is because I got an email from my homeowners association president saying one to count everybody in the subdivision.
At least this is working, I guess.
Fifth Road, yeah. Yep, that rezoning and. Oh, I mean, it's,
How are you? Fine. Yep. It's gonna be a long one until I get started.
I won't be able to draw anything she can get. So I'll just have to get through it. But at least this is working.
okay, so you're ready, huh?
Yeah.
Says he was ready. You ready? Hey, Mark, you ready? Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to call the meeting to order here and get on with it. Glad to see a rather large turnout tonight, and especially with the weather and what have you. There must be something on the agenda of interest. Before we start, I want to call the meeting of the Farragut Municipal Planning Commission to order. And before we get into the official agenda, I want to ask the mayor if he has any remarks he wants to make tonight of general interest.
Yeah, don't at this time.
Okay. First thing on our agenda is the Citizens Forum. And this is a period on the agenda where we throw the floor open to the general public to bring up anything that address the commission or the mayor, board of mayor alderman representatives that are here. We ask that it not be associated with any of the agenda items, that you hold any of the discussion, comments, what have you, till we get to that point in time on the agenda for that item. Are there any general citizen forum comments from anyone tonight? There being none, I'll move to the approval of minutes of the February 19th, 2015 meeting. Are there any comments, additions, corrections? I have a motion and a second. All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
And since I was not in attendance.
The next item on the agenda, Mark, you want to, we're going to probably defer that, so I'll need a motion, but we want to deal with that one, I think, since it was supposed to be for discussion and public hearing.
Oh, yeah.
We'll need a motion to defer that one, but
Yeah, item number 3 is not ready for action. They still haven't finished the plat and the field items, so if we could just
okay. And for the record, that's the discussion and public hearing on a final plat for the Hanover Court subdivision located on Old Stage Road at South Watt Road intersections, parcels 94.02, 94.03, tax map 151, zone R1 and R4, 36 lots, 9.87 acres, Matthew Sturgill LLC applicant. So I have a motion to defer.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor of deferral, signify
Aye.
by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, no, it's deferred. Item number 4 is discussion and public hearing on a final plat for the townhomes at Wentworth subdivision located on Old Stage Road at Willow Ridge Way, Parcel 1, Group J, tax map 152H, to establish the private access drive as a public right-of-way. Benchmark Associates Incorporated applicant.
Since we obviously have a lot of people here, probably not here for this item, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this other than just indicate to you that what they're requesting is for their private street to be platted as a public right-of-way. A number of years ago, a lot of the subdivisions that were originally developed with private streets came before the Board of Mayor and Aldermen and requested that the town take over their streets. We did an analysis of those streets. We required that everyone in those affected subdivisions had to consent to that. They, in this particular subdivision off Old Stage Road, they had one individual that did not want to proceed back in 2002. Now they have unanimous support for this request. So what they're asking for is approval of a final plat that would basically transform the private access easement that's currently called Willow Ridge Way to a 50 and 40 foot public right-of-way, basically in that area through the middle there and that hammerhead at the end. That would become a public right-of-way for town maintenance. Of course, as part of converting the private access easement to a public right-of-way, a plat is required, as is all the signatures of the residents in this development. That's what you see on the left there with all those signature blocks. It's my understanding from the surveyor that everyone has signed it except for one family, and they're out of town, but they do agree with what's being conveyed here. The staff did ask when we reviewed the plat that a couple of plat notes be added. They did have to go through the Board of Zoning Appeals and get variances on the front yard setbacks because when the access easement became a public right-of-way, the front property line shifted toward the buildings as constructed. And so therefore some of the buildings don't meet the setback requirements in the R4 zoning district, and they had to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals and get that cleared up, and the board did approve that. But they did condition it on that there wouldn't be any approval of any expansions to any of those existing homes if it would exacerbate their condition of nonconformity with the setback requirements. So the staff will recommend approval of this plat subject to getting the remaining signatures, and they also understand that they need to update their restrictive covenants because the it would need to take out the language that refers to the access easement and make that the public, reference to public right-of-way. The name of the road will change as well from Willow Ridge Way to Willow Ridge Lane to acknowledge the public street suffix. And with those recommendations, the staff would recommend approval of this plat.
Comments, questions from the commission?
Was there any remediation that they needed to do on those roads in terms of bringing them up to standard?
Not to my knowledge. They were, of course, evaluated before they went to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, and they were slightly below the standards in terms of the composition of the roadways. They do some sample core drills throughout the road section to see what the depth of asphalt and then base stone and all that is, and they were slightly below standard, but they were deemed to be in a good condition, and that's why they were recommended for acceptance back in September when it went to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen.
Okay.
Questions or comments from the commission? Anybody in the audience have any comments or questions on this? There being none, do I have a motion?
I'll move for approval.
Second? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Mark, item 5 was, did you all remove that from the agenda?
Yes, item 5 was originally advertised, but after review, it was a 2-lot subdivision that does not require the Planning Commission's approval.
Okay. We'll move on to item 6. There's discussion on a clarification of building materials associated with the overlook at Campbell Station Apartments north of the Holiday Inn Express, parcels 108 and 109, tax map 130, 820 North Campbell Station Road, 32.31 acres. Leon Lawson, applicant.
This item is on the agenda to help clarify the Planning Commission's action that was taken back in December when the site plan for this apartment project, which is north of Holiday Inn Express off North Campbell Station Road, was approved. As you know, there were a number of subject twos. I think there were 39 subject twos. One of the items that received a lot of discussion was the materials on these apartment buildings. And when the action was, the motions were made, and this is reflected in the minutes that were subsequently approved in January, one of the commissioners moved that the plan be approved, but item number 8, which dealt with the building materials, be revised to say that the buildings be 70% brick visible from North Campbell Station Road right-of-way. And the reason this is before you is when the plans were resubmitted to address the subject twos that the Planning Commission had when they approved the set of plans, there was no brick on the buildings. And from the staff's position, we didn't feel comfortable saying that what they submitted was acceptable. The applicant's understanding of the action that was taken is that the stone that they're proposing to satisfy the significant masonry requirement in this zoning district would suffice as the masonry element of their buildings. But again, when we watched the video of the meeting and looked at what was approved in the minutes, it did say brick, and so they just needed some clarification. There are some renderings of the latest renderings of the buildings that you see in your packet and up on the screen. The lower part of most of these buildings is stone, and then a significant amount of the rest of it is hardy board and some board and batten material. But that's why this is before you. It really is a Planning Commission item. As you know, when we were creating this zoning district, and then when we were revising the R6 zoning district, we added a stipulation in there dealing with the building facade, because we didn't have anything prior to that. And at the time, the architectural design standards were still going through the process of being approved. They weren't approved. So we had our consultant give us some wording about what we should include in our apartment ordinances that would at least give us some ability to, control the materials or recommend the materials that are used on the buildings. And they came up with that the buildings had to have a significant masonry element, and that could be stone or brick, either one. So, again, they're just here before you for clarification, and I think the applicant is here to answer any questions you may have.
State your name and
Sure. Leon Lawson, Perry Management Group, 8707 Old Colony Trail, Knoxville, Tennessee. Like I said, we originally presented it from the very beginning. These buildings were presented with stone facades as our masonry elements. And somehow in the final wording, somebody said brick, even though I clarified at least 3 times during that meeting that it wasn't brick, it's stone. And sometimes people's head went up and down, yes, stone, and then somebody else said brick. And we just think the buildings look better as stone. We think it's an appropriate masonry material, and it just comes down to we would like to be able to use stone or brick because both of them are in the ordinance, and we just need to get this clarified.
Well, I guess I remember, personally remember the comments about the brick toward the end of the discussion and thought that's the way we left the meeting. However, since then we've also adopted the architectural review standards, and so we obviously reconsider that, discuss it. But I also think with that being invoked now, you have to meet the requirements for coverage and what have you that went along with that standard that we've adopted too.
We were approved with the coverage that is presented here. We went back and revised our elevations and such to create, at that time, the significant standard, what everybody deemed was significant, and that we came up with a 50% masonry being significant, with the additional 70% on anything on Campbell Station Road. So, we, in the drawings, we state that we do have the 50% being significant, and or there is the 70% from Campbell Station. So, we have met the criteria that was established in the December meeting. It's just the question of material, what the material actually is.
I think the thing to flesh out, though, is that if we approved it with one of the stipulations being brick, and now it's going to be a change to go to stone, it kind of hinges on that. Need to probably look at meeting the requirements. That's kind of like a reopener to look at that again, are those requirements. I'm not the final voice on anything like that. I just sense that when you make a change like that, and so I throw it open for discussion. I'm open to look at this. Any other comments?
I don't recall hearing brick as being the end all.
I don't remember it was the end all. I just remember it was a point, and that was a point that we made as a stipulation. I don't personally, I could go with stone myself, but that was one of the stipulations and so we need to deal with that.
Well, as I recall, the intent was brick, and
Yeah.
certainly we've had some discussion with our new standards since then, but and it's obviously what has been memorialized at this point, so.
Well, like I said, actually, we've always presented these buildings as stone.
Yeah, I'm not saying you didn't propose, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying as the board, what my recollection is that we ended up at brick, so.
See, and that, I guess that's where the confusion comes in the fact that obviously we had a very lengthy discussion back in December, over and over again, actually, we've been here many, many times. over the last 6 months or so. And there was one member that likes brick, and somehow brick became the word, a universal word for masonry, and we've always said yes, masonry, and it's always been masonry is stone or brick, and then somebody started using brick as a universal word for masonry, and that's where the confusion has come in, and the fact that, like I said, we've always presented these buildings as stone. And so, you know, we just want to be able to use the materials that have been approved in the ordinance, which are masonry, which are stone and brick and or brick. You know, and that to me is what we all agreed upon back in December, is that we just need to meet a masonry requirement, and we've done that. We just would like to use stone, not necessarily brick. If we have to, if you deem it that we have no other choice to use brick, then I guess we'll use brick. But that's not what we would like to do.
Fully understand that, but I guess, you know, we're kind of at a point where we have the official record, and it's an item for discussion, so it's not something we're going to necessarily bring up and I guess re-vote on at this point in time. I mean, I think you all could come back officially and request that.
That's what we're doing.
Okay.
That's
we're
what
doing with
we,
this. That's
But
what
it's
we're
only
asking.
on the agenda for discussion.
well, actually, that's not the way we submitted it.
That's the way we submitted. We were asking for a decision.
I mean, yes, I mean, we wouldn't be here for a discussion, we're here for a ruling.
I understand that, but
And that's the way I thought I presented it to Mark, is the fact that we want a ruling on the fact of what is the materials that we can use. And so I don't, there again, this
well,
is,
let me suggest
a
something.
point of
I'm
confusion.
willing, if we think, to open it up for consideration, but with the consensus of the rest of the commission, if we want to. But, okay.
I'll second.
Okay. Well, motion to open it up in a second. All in favor? Say aye.
Just a point of clarity, do we need to do anything as far as public notice? Because the,
Well, that's the thing concerning
I
me.
wanna
with-
make sure
this
that we
wasn't up
don't-
for a- Says just discussion on the agenda. So how do we advertise it in the paper?
Well, it was a discussion on clarification of the building materials that were associated with that site plan approval. And so it was that one particular item that's already been approved, just to get clarification on whether in fact you all wanted brick or if stone would be acceptable as the masonry component.
I think the clarification is brick. Now, we want to change it, and we need to do it, you know, officially.
well, I'm seeing, if I'm reading his nod correctly, our town administrator says that we can vote on it. Is that correct? That'd be great. Thanks, David.
Thank you. David Smoke, Town Administrator. Just wanted to clarify, public hearings are really always used for rezonings, big decision items that are obviously you have a lot of crowd here for tonight. Items such as this, when you're really talking about an individual project and trying to figure out whether or not you agree with the brick, masonry, stone, whatever that may be, I think you can handle it in the way that Mark has described it in the agenda so far. I think that's plenty of public notice. Everybody knows what this item is going to be talked about.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion from the,
I don't think there's much to discuss other than to reword the thing to say that, to reflect the standards anyway, as the masonry, redisplay it as masonry instead of brick, and then you come up with stone or brick.
but recognizing the coverage difference? Go ahead.
No, coverages,
We don't
we
have
agree
a problem with the
It's just
coverage.
its material. We got brick in there for some reason. As I recall, the discussion that we got fairly extensive, but we started probably using brick is synonymous with masonry in the discussion, and got
Commissioner Myers was really the one that
But it wasn't intended to be that way, but it was.
Well, I would actually differ. I believe it was intended that way, because knowing Commissioner Myers, when he uses
I know
brick,
it.
he means brick. He's not talking any kind of masonry products.
And actually, I had a conversation with Mr. Myers before he went on vacation. And I asked him to send Mark an email that said, would you be opposed to masonry or stone on these facades? He said, no, as long as there is some brick involved in it. He doesn't want it to be, he understands that it may not be 100% brick or 100% stone. But he wanted some brick involved in the facade.
Any other comment?
That email?
No.
And I guess I wonder about that in the fact that kind of like significant that we approved of or was approved last time is who decides what those percentages are. It's not in the ordinance at all. You know, it just says masonry. So, you know, here again, we're at this impasse of the definitions that we're using, so.
Well, and this discussion was before the architectural guidelines were established officially, so I kind of feel like we should just let them do stone and, you know, I think we're splitting hairs here. Masonry is masonry.
That's personally the way I feel.
So,
Yeah, I mean, I think we
Yeah,
stay
but the
within
percentage remains.
what we discussed with them back then, we're just really deal with the material.
so can we vote to,
Not,
Yes, you would
Okay.
need to make a motion to
Need a
take
motion?
formal action on that.
that they can proceed with masonry / stone? Whatever, however you want to say it, but I think we should approve it.
Sort of correction that, where you had brick, is it delete it in the first place, delete brick and put masonry, and then
What-
If y'all could, one thing, if you could please speak into your mic, I'd appreciate it. I'm bad about that myself, so
Sorry.
it's all right.
What did you say, Betty? That the,
I was saying that delete the word brick and insert masonry. Already defined
Which is, yeah, what the
stone
requirement
or
is.
brick.
The masonry is either stone or brick,
Stone or brick.
and the 70% remains.
Yes, the percentages
On
would
that.
still be the same, 50 and 70%. Yep.
do I have a second to the motion?
Second.
All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The item number 7 is a discussion and public hearing on a grading plan for the former John Deere site, parcel 77, tax map 151, zone C1, 13127 Kingston Pike, 3.28 acres, Robert Shagan, Commercial Realty applicant.
Yeah, that one's not ready. It's just not ready in terms of their site plan submittal, so that will not be discussed.
I have a motion to postpone that one.
I'll move to postpone that item until appropriate
Item for
documentation is obtained.
It was on for discussion and public hearing.
Do we have to vote on that?
Yeah, since it,
Second.
published.
Yeah.
Have a motion
Yeah.
Whiting Ed made it.
and a second. Betty seconded. All in favor of postponement? Say aye. Any opposed? Next item is number 8, discussion and public hearing on a concept plan for Union Grove subdivision located on Union Road, parcel 36, tax map 142, zone R2, 50 lots, 25.75 acres, Homestead Land Holdings LLC applicant, we're gonna defer the discussion of that one and to
Number
discuss
11.
it in conjunction with item 11 on the agenda. Request discussion, is a discussion on a request to rezone that same parcel. So we'll move to item number 9, is discussion and public hearing on a request to rezone portions of Lot 3 of the Smith property, portions of parcels 59 and 59.07, tax map 152, located at 11739 Turkey Creek Road, and portions of parcel 15, Group B, tax map 1531, located at 735 Anchor Villas Lane, from R1 to R1/OSMR and R1/OSMR to R1. Rackley Engineering applicant.
I think it might take longer to read that than it would to take action on this item. But this is a simple rezoning request. It relates to the re-subdivision plat that was approved last month, where they were basically shifting some property lines slightly to make lots more functional. And since those properties were zoned, had different zoning designations, what they're doing now is just making sure that the zoning lines match the adjusted property lines, because in the town we require zoning lines to follow property lines. So the staff recommends approval of resolution PC-15-04.
You have any comments?
No, I have nothing to add.
Okay.
I'm the applicant, so.
Anybody have any questions or comments? If not, is there a motion?
I'll move for approval.
Second?
Second?
Having a motion, a second, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Item number 10, discussion on a request to rezone a portion of parcel 69, tax map 142, north of the Farragut Church of Christ, 19.66 acres, from R2 to R6, Continental 333 Fund, LLC applicant.
Okay, I'm going to just give a brief overview of the staff's analysis of this request. And I know the applicant does have a PowerPoint presentation that we'll show here shortly as well, just to go over their project and what they're wanting to do, and hopefully help answer some questions that people may have. This is a workshop discussion. That means we're not taking formal action on it. We're just talking about it. We do this with most rezonings because most rezonings involve questions that, can have difficult answers. We need public input to help us with those answers, and that's why this and a couple of the other rezonings tonight are workshop items. This particular request is to go to R6 multifamily residential. It's that rectangular shaped parcel there. It's about 20 acres. It fronts on Smith Road. I'll let the applicant talk about the project itself, but basically, as you know, recently we made some updates to our R6 zoning district, and we created a new apartment zoning district for open space. That was requested by a couple of different applicants, one of which was just before you with the project north of the interstate. And this was also trying to help us to look at our comprehensive plan and try to implement different aspects of the plan. One of those is encouraging greater housing choice. It's a strategy 3. So this particular area on the future land use map is designated for, let me go to that. So I think the applicant's going to go through these pictures. Sorry. This is from the comprehensive plan of the town. The areas in brown and medium density residential, and I apologize, the smart board's not working this evening, or I highlight that for you, but the area in question is medium density residential. an R6 zoning designation could fit in with that designation. It would be on the very high end. Medium density residential in the comprehensive plan is 6 to 12 units per acre. What they're requesting will allow them to go to the very high end of 12 units per acre. It could very well be feasible that an attached single-family development up to 6 units per acre could also fit in with that medium density description in our land use plan. So anything ranging from 6 to 12 units per acre, may be appropriate based on that designation. As a transitional use, multifamily is frequently used where you have commercial or institutional, you have vacant land, and then you have maybe an attached single-family residential. So it is frequently used as a transitional type of development. And it, could, in this context, help advance some of the objectives of our comprehensive plan. But when someone requests a rezoning, I must point out at the staff's position is we don't just look at that parcel, we also look at the town as a whole and what are the town-wide implications. One of the things that we've been working hard on recently, and we passed 4 or 5 different ordinances with the Board of Mayor and Aldermen just a few weeks ago to try to help us advance what was identified as the most important strategy in our comprehensive plan when it was updated in 2012, and that was to help us bring about a downtown. And that downtown area would be somewhere around here, key to the success from the staff's position of a downtown would be to have, a pretty decent residential density near that core area that would be within walking distance of those uses and services. Where downtowns don't succeed, they don't usually have, a high housing component. So what that means in the context of this request or any other rezoning request to multifamily that's outside of our mixed-use town center is that we need to think about what is the opportunity cost of having a rezoning on those properties. I don't know that the town, given its size and given the fact that there's other, multifamily projects that are being approved now and just outside the town, that we can support, a significant amount of multifamily. If we're trying to promote our downtown, I think that's something that you all need to really think about. I know anybody that's ever come to me and talked about doing an apartment project, I always mention to them, I'd love to see you do something around here, around the town hall, around our mixed-use town center, because that's, that really is going to be key to that being successful. So that's an important thing to think about in relation to this request. I do feel that, this property, if we're just looking at this specific piece of property, that if you were going to look at the medium density residential designation, I think somewhere, and again, this is if you wanted to have a higher density residential in this area, I think somewhere between 6 to 12 units would be a better fit for this location rather than, being on the high end of that density. Now, I also would like to see anything that happens on that property to be actually integrated and become part of that larger neighborhood and community, and not be a fortress that's isolated from the rest of the area. We want to see whatever happens there become part of that little neighborhood area. So that's some of the things that the staff, some of our observations on this request. Again, this is just workshop. I know there's a lot of people here to talk about this item. The applicant has been very great to work with. They do have a traffic impact study that was prepared based on their proposed development. I'm sure they can speak to that, but that's the overview from the staff's perspective.
Applicant, can you identify yourself?
Martin Widder, 142 Champions Point.
Wait a minute, I think she,
You were first?
The applicant.
Oh, you're the applicant.
Applicant.
I'm sorry.
what I'm going to do here, Gwen, I'm just going to pull up your, I'm going to pull up your PowerPoint here. Just hold on one second.
And if you would identify yourself for everybody.
Thank you for the introduction, Mark. My name is Gwen Wheeler. I'm with Continental Properties. For the record, our address is W134 and 8675 Executive Parkway. That's Menominee Falls, Wisconsin 53051. Thank you for having us tonight, and I'll try to keep this brief. I know that we have a lot to accomplish tonight. Very briefly, I want to introduce Sarah Johnson from my office has accompanied me. We also have Harold Cannon and Brad Salisbury from Cannon & Cannon. They're our civil engineer consultants that we have engaged to assist us on this project. We also have Arthur Seymour of Franz McConnell and Seymour as our land use attorney to just assist us in understanding the processes within the town. They're here to answer any questions that you may have beyond my expertise.
Sorry.
I'm ready.
All right.
I just went through
You already
this
did
as
this, yep.
introductions,
There we go.
just a very brief overview of what we're proposing here. We are a Class A upscale apartment community called the Springs at Farragut. Again, as Mark said, we are consistent with the land use plan. We will meet or exceed all requirements of the R6 zoning district. And I want to emphasize that the Springs at Farragut will be harmonious with the community and will have no adverse impact on public services, traffic, home values, or schools.
Nobody's going to drive?
This is just a quick aerial of the site
Can we
to
have a
put it
little
in
order, please?
context.
I want to refer everybody back to the etiquette guidelines, please. I mean, I think they're mostly adults in here. But please respect the applicant's presentation, and there'll be time for comments and what have you, but I really want to make sure that we don't kind of turn this into more of a free-for-all here, okay?
Just to put the site in context, we are north of Kingston Pike. We'll be extending Peterson Road to our site, just north of the Farragut Church of Christ, as Mark pointed out. The site plan on the next slide will show you that we are proposing 11 buildings. There will be only a resident access from Peterson. There will be no access from Smith Road. We will only be having an emergency access from Smith Road as required by the town. We will have significant landscape buffers from the adjacent properties, and we will be doing our best to preserve the natural mature tree lines on the west. This is just some really quick details about our project. I won't go into every single thing. Amenities that we offer, off-leash dog parks, a playground, a clubhouse with pool, fitness center, pergolas, outdoor green spaces. We really want to provide nice amenities for our residents. The elevations, we are a two-story structure with private access to each unit, high-quality exterior materials. We will be taking into account the town's architectural guidelines and meeting all of their masonry requirements. Here's just some exterior photos of renderings and photos of past developments that we have done across the country. These are some interior shots showing you the high quality materials that we use. We will have granite countertops throughout. washer and dryers in all the units. These are some shots of our clubhouse, showing you the community space, the outdoor grilling areas, and patio furniture for a resident gathering. So what we're here today to discuss is the land use and the zone map amendment. Again, we fit with the comprehensive land use plan of the town. The site is identified to be medium density residential from 6 to 12 units. The land use plan identifies a need for greater housing choices. It identifies residential uses within walking distance to commercial. It also identifies a need for transitional uses between the commercial and the single family. The Springs at Farragut is consistent with this plan. We will provide that variety of housing that it identifies. We will be that transitional use between the commercial and the single family. We will fill a void in the town for high-end multifamily rental units. This is our type of development attracts young professionals that are looking for high-quality rental property within close proximity to commercial services. This is just a quick analysis of the zoning code to show that we will be meeting or exceeding all of those R6 requirements. I specifically want to point out the setbacks. The minimum required for building is 50 feet. We're looking at 60, 170 feet building setbacks to be conscious of the neighbors. I'd also like to point out that there are currently no undeveloped available properties in the town that are already zoned R6. Now, there's been a lot of discussion, as we all know, and there's been some common discussion topics, and I just wanted to respond to some of those. Continental's project will not create a disproportionate burden on public services. Our first-class property management will oversee this. A lot of our managers, they typically live on-site, so does the maintenance staff, to oversee the project. Frequently we offer a local police officer a discounted rate to live on-site to help us keep our community safe. We have a very stringent resident screening process, and we have a historic record showing that we have a very low per capita impact on public services. Just to summarize our resident screening process, we do use a third-party screening company. They look for income requirements, payment history, criminal history, fraud alerts. The residents will have to prove that they make 300 times the rent to qualify. 300 times the rent in income, to clarify. Just to give you an idea of our typical resident, we are a national multifamily developer, so we have other communities. We've looked at who we rent to, what is our demographic. This is just an example of the high-quality jobs that they have. Healthcare, teachers. There are a lot of a high percentage of retired folks, empty nesters, insurance, quality people with high incomes. We did do, as Mark said, we did do a traffic analysis. We looked at 3 intersections: Kingston Pike and Smith Road, Kingston Pike and Peterson, Kingston Pike and Federal, all 3 of which are existing signalized intersections. The analysis showed that there will be no impact on the level of service of these intersections when our project is complete. They all function at a high level now, and they will continue to function at a high level. Above and beyond the scope that actually was requested from the town, we, Cannon looked at the movements of the residential properties that are on south of Kingston Pike and Peterson, to see what they do when they leave their subdivision, and what movements do they make? How many of them make a left onto Kingston Pike to make a right onto Smith Road? how many come from Smith Road, take a left, and then make a right onto Peterson. It's a very small percentage. This looked at the total cars during peak hours, and you can see that only 4% from Peterson went to Smith, and only 5% of the cars came from Smith to Peterson Road. We believe that this will be very typical of the traffic patterns created by our development. This is just to show you that the Farragut falls within a very similar community to what we've developed before. This is the type of community Continental looks for. It is very desirable, and we just wanted to show that our other existing springs are very similar. Home values. There are many reputable studies that show that multifamily development does not negatively impact home values. And in some instances, it even shows that there's an increase in property value. New high-end market rate apartments can be an indicator of a thriving economy. Developers also make a very substantial investment in these developments, and that is an incentive for them to continue to maintain those properties. Just to summarize our commitment to Farragut, we will be spending approximately $37 million on this project. We have a develop and hold strategy. We have a large base. We are privately held. We have a large base of private investors that follow us from project to project. And we just wanted to point out that we will be generating approximately $222,000 in taxes for the area. Another thing I wanted to point out is as our commitment to Farragut is we do have a program called Springs Cares, where each one of our developments identify a local charity to work with. They're supported by our home office to work with these charities and have a variety of events to benefit them and just make that connection. The next slide shows some examples of the existing charities that we work with. Things like Ronald McDonald House, Humane Society, Cancer Research, the Wounded Warrior Project, and Warrior Transition Battalion is very big in San Antonio. There's a very well-renowned hospital there for rehabilitating soldiers, and our communities there actually provide complimentary housing to their families so that they can be together while the vet is being treated. And further about our management, again, we have a first-class management team. They typically live on site. Some of our earlier communities have gotten significant upgrades recently, just to show that we really take pride in our communities and want to maintain that investment. Here's some examples of the things we've done, from exterior paint to landscaping to adding volleyball courts and chipping greens. Just since 2011, we've invested $3.5 million in just these 3 properties in order to keep them competitive. And I'd like to point out that they are still some of the most competitive communities in their towns with very high occupancy rates. Another very significant thing I want to point out is the landscape buffering. We will be meeting or exceeding all of the requirements of the town. We'll be adding very significant landscaping to all property boundaries. We will be adding fully opaque screening along Smith Road and the brick pylons to match some of the adjacent properties to keep this harmonious with the surrounding area. I just wanted to point out some of the existing views from the adjacent properties. You can see that there's some very mature trees in place. We will not be touching any of that. Those will remain. And all we will do is add to that. So there will be very little actual visual connection from the adjacent single family. This is from Waverly Court, showing the existing mature trees that will remain. And this is what we are proposing you will see from Waverly Court. This is Smith Road now, and this is what we propose it will be with our landscaping and masonry pillars. Lighting will meet all the town's ordinances and will be kept internal to the site to not be a nuisance. We will not have a disproportionate impact on the local schools. Historically, our developments have less than 5% school-age children. We attract single young professionals. Studies have shown that multifamily housing generates far fewer children on a per-unit basis than single-family housing. Open space. I just wanted to show that this is not designated as an open space property in the land use plan. So we're not reducing that for the community. It is designated multifamily, or I'm sorry, medium density residential. The R6 multifamily district has specific ordinances on low impact development. So we will be, in regards to stormwater management, and we will be meeting or exceeding all of those requirements. And then just a quick summary to sort of recap. We are consistent with the comprehensive land use plan. We will provide that smooth transition from the residential to commercial uses. Our first-class management will mitigate impacts on public services. Our sole resident access will be from on Pearson from Kingston Pike, so it will not have adverse traffic impacts. The high quality of our project will mitigate any impacts on the adjacent home values. The substantial setbacks, tree preservation, landscaping buffers are really going to provide screening from the adjacent properties. And again, the lighting will be kept internal to our site. And the last slide is actually a rendering that we have created, artistic rendering of our proposal. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Anybody else going to speak with the applicant, or?
Only if you have any specific questions for someone that
Okay,
needs to
that's-
come up and answer
That's
them.
fine. You had your team with you, and I.
Yes.
And it's my experience that Mr. Seymour likes to sometimes say something.
He's just here for backup today.
Are there questions, discussion from the commission?
Not right now.
Well, and wait a minute, if you want to say something, I ask you to please go to the microphone. So
Yeah, we'll
that
get
it
to
can
that in a
be-
minute, but.
Oh,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Any questions, comments from the commission?
Oh, on the commission, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Oh,
Oh, yeah, there's something?
Stand by.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Now we'll take the, any questions, comments, discussion from the public here tonight. We ask that you come to the podium and identify yourself and
Right.
your address.
Good evening, everybody. Martin Ritter, 142 Champions Point. I went ahead of myself a while ago. I'm the current president of the Fox Dent Homeowners Association. And I have a little statement to read, but before I want to mention two things, going back to what the lady said. One is to inform the board that I bought a new car, and that is going to impact traffic in town just by itself. So I'm really glad that their project is not going to impact traffic. The other thing that comes up in her statements is that this is going to generate $220,000 in taxes, which I'm sure is a fact. I was wondering, where do those taxes go? How many go to the county? How many go to the town? It's not going to impact the schools because there's 5.6. I'll round it up to 6% of school children only. On 300 apartments, 600-700 people. The school children will be between 35 and 40, and to send a kid to school costs about $10,000 a year. Therefore, the total of $220,000 of taxes which they're going to generate for the county, for the state, and for the town of Farragut covers only about half of the cost of sending those children to school. So I tend to disagree with that statement too. And now let me say that also common sense says that property values, particularly in the very high-end communities like ours in Farragut, are affected. And what I like to bring up to people, and I did this before in front of the alderman and the mayor, was to mention that if I take an average price of a house in Farragut to be $400,000, I might be off by some, and I figure that initially it affects it in 5%, that's 20 grand out of my pocket. If it affects it in 10%, that's $40,000 out of my pocket. Beyond that, I don't want to go into specifics of roads, etc., but I do invite you gentlemen to drive around the area and look at apartment complexes. And you're going to find that initially they're very nicely built. Then down the road, the companies like Continental, of course, they look for their return, which is absolutely legitimate. And my understanding is that somebody from Continental in the previous meeting mentioned to one of the members of our board that they had already sold down into the market 30% of their developments to other parties. We can safely presume that the second buyer is going to go after his revenue and maintain it, not at the same level as the first one. My property value has gone down another 5 or 10 grand. Then it gets sold, and this is many years down the road, to a third party that really says, as much as I can get out of it, and putting the least dime I can on it. And by that time, I'm not going to get poor. I won't be here anymore. I think you should see that kind of conflict that we see. Although I heard with great interest the town administrator talking about the concept of the downtown, and this would be some kind of support or anchor to it. But still, if I understand this correctly, first come the citizens, then come the board of mayor and aldermen, and then committees like yourself. And we, the citizens, the existing, current citizens of Farragut, with probably one or two exceptions, do not want apartments. I'm not talking about. So, the proof is in the pudding. So our mandate to you guys, as your bosses, and trying to put it in, is no. Vote for no. I've heard several times that this complies with the rules, the current rules and regulations in Farragut. Well, I'm guilty. I fell asleep. And while you guys were voting lots of things over the years, because they were not of the essence to me, and probably a little too abstract for me, I didn't come here and talk to you. Therefore, they're now on the books. Change them, please. Go back to where we, the citizens, want them to be. Thank you again. So let me stop here for a moment and give you an example. I understand that you guys, and correct me if I'm wrong, had an issue with the outside paint of the Isarium. And there was some back and forth on it, and finally the commission prevailed and got the merchant to paint the color he was supposed to. I'm sure that most of these people would have an opinion about it, but it really didn't affect our life that much, so we didn't come. Why are we here? Because we feel very strongly about what's happening right now in the town of Farragut and the project to start incorporating apartment complexes in the town. And I'm trying to go back to my readings here. I wrote something nice here. We're here to remind you, gentlemen, about what your mandate consists of, and to ask, some of you even would demand, if we would dare, to listen to the majority of the citizens. We are the bosses We don't want this. Major McGill seems to quite frequently challenge us with a reminder that it will be very hard to find a more transparent administration than this. What does this mean? That you do things out in the open as our state laws demand to begin with, or that you do them also right, following the spirit and the actual wishes and mandate of us, the citizens. And by the way, if this is about money for the town, allow me to disagree. It might bring some additional revenues, a little chunk of those $220,000. But I'd rather prefer to see that Farragut continues with this tradition of intelligent frugality, which you seem to want to deviate perhaps from. If we don't spend it, we don't need it. And referring to expenses such as historical lightnings, the purchase of a derelict house on Kingston Pike and Campbell Station, consultants on rebranding the town, good opportunity to save some money. That way, we will continue being under budget, that is, living slightly below our means, which is one of the first things that impressed me when I considered moving to Farragut. I got that little yearly booklet, and I say, wow, someplace where officialdom doesn't spend more than what they have. I really respected that. I believe it or not, it was one of the considerations to move to this town. And so let's keep on being fiscally responsible, simple as that. So, me personally, of course, and Foxden as such are against not this project. No, we are against apartment complexes in Farragut. Thank you. I didn't know it was so popular.
Hello, my name is Jack Farrell. My wife and I live in Baldwin Park, and we came to Farragut in 1971, and our daughter is a 1974 graduate of the Farragut High School. We decided to go to Athens because they had an airport there, a general aviation airport. And then after our tour and my wife couldn't get up and down the stairs of the two-story house, we decided to look for another place to live, and we said Farragut has got the reputation of being the greatest community, family community with family residents that we know of. So let's go back to Farragut. And I will say the lady that remarked on Continental Properties is very well in the property. Those properties be really well accepted somewhere else, but they're inappropriate, I think, here. And I just looking at the organizational chart of the Farragut, and the top of the list is the citizens or the chairpersons of this group. And I would say that 99.9% of the people here are against that building of that multi-dwelling in Farragut. And I would like to propose a proposal that we make the whole entire 65 acres a community park. We have 6 parks here, but none of them have nature trails and places where they could walk down and have picnics and enjoy all the nature that we have behind us in Baldwin Park. There's wild turkey, deer, and many, many species of birds. And once Continental Property starts their bulldozers and starts their construction, the trees will be gone, the wildlife will disappear, and that'll be the end of that. So that's basically all I've got to say. That I think it's very highly inappropriate to build that multi-dwelling place and behind our place, and that just opens the door for the other 60 acres to go. So thank you for your attention, and I hope you vote against it.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Michael Wilson. My wife Kathy and I live at 333 Bernie Circle in the Baldwin Park neighborhood. Tonight I'd just like to expand a little bit on Mr. Shipley's comments he made earlier. His comments are in line with Policy 4 of the Comprehensive Land Use Plan adopted by this Commission on December 20th, 2012. Policy 4 states the base density assumed for rezoning or planned unit development designation of a parcel is the lowest density of the designated range. The town will consider granting higher density in the range relative to demonstrated significant public benefits to be achieved by the project. So one must ask, what are the significant public benefits that warrant development at the maximum number of units per acre for R6 zoning? The proposed development is an enclosed gated apartment community that will not have access to ample pedestrian amenities such as parks, trails, or landscaping as called for under the medium density land use plan description. To access pedestrian amenities will require future residents to travel approximately 2 miles along Kingston Pike and North Campbell Station to reach the nearest park or trail. The only trail connection that will be in place is with Baldwin Park, a private residential community. To further state Mr. Shipley's comments, the characteristics section of the plan's medium-density residential land use description says, quote, may include single-family homes as well as small multifamily dwellings such as duplex, triplex, townhomes, and small condo or apartment buildings. The proposed complex consisting of 236 units and 11 two-story buildings with 61 standalone garages, 305 surface parking spaces, a clubhouse, and a pool is well outside that characterization. It is evident that this is not the type of small apartment building the Commission and the residents had in mind at the time the comprehensive land use plan was created. As a relatively new Farragut resident, I applaud the Planning Commission for instituting a long-range development plan for the town. In particular, as a property owner, I appreciate the balance provided between encouraging grading housing choices and strategy 3, while noting, quote, doing so requires protecting existing neighborhoods, unquote. Based on the comprehensive land use plan, this rezoning and development is better suited to be part of the downtown area identified in strategy number 1, as addressed by Mr. Shipley earlier. I would encourage the Planning Commission to work with Continental Properties to identify a location within the identified downtown area suited for the project. I would ask the Planning Commission to maintain the credibility of the entire plan as adopted in December 2012 by voting against the rezoning application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell.
Hello, my name is Paul Johnson. My wife and I own our house at 344 Bernie Circle in Baldwin Park subdivision. We moved into our new home in May of 2014. Our prior house, which we lived in for 36 years, is about 12 miles east of our current location. There are 7 apartment complexes within a 1-mile radius of our prior home. This was one of the reasons why we decided to relocate to Farragut. I was asked to examine crime reports with regards to the proposed rezoning for the Continental Properties apartment complex. I used the Regional Analysis Information Sharing, or RAIDS, online software developed by BAIR Analytics. This GIS software allows anyone to analyze crime statistics throughout the United States. I gathered, first of all, I had to go through and I tried to locate all the apartment complexes within West Knoxville and the West Knox County area. So I gathered crime reports on these apartment complexes. Basically, I used the location of Kingston Pike and North Shore Drive in Bearden and looked at everything from that intersection west, excluding the apartments in Farragut that currently exist. There are 53 apartment complexes with 10,976 units in my study area. This is excluding the 2 existing apartment complexes in Farragut that have a total of 280 units. Comparing the crime reports of these 53 apartment complexes to the 2 in Farragut is not really practical because of the small number. So I gathered some crime statistics on the town of Farragut to see what the differences are. For the past 12 months, there were 662 crime reports for the 53 complexes in West Knox County. The top crime reports for the apartment complexes are, and I'm just going to provide the top 6 here, disorderly conduct, that represents 28.3% of the police reports. Burglary from motor vehicles, 16.2%. Vandalism, 11%. Theft, 9.5%. Residential burglary, 9.4%. And other assaults, which means the non-sexual assaults, 7.3%. During the same time period, Farragut had 878 crime reports. The top crime reports are traffic incidents, like fender benders, that's 25.3% of the total. Farragut had some disorderly conduct reports, which were 21.9%. Burglary from motor vehicles, 9.1%. Vandalism, 8.3%. DUIs, 7.3%. Usually those occur on public streets, not in apartment complexes. And residential burglaries, 5.9%. So the primary action of law enforcement to apartment complexes in West Knox County, and consider there's some much worse apartment complexes in East Knoxville, in East Knox County. So I didn't look at those, but in West Knox County, they were disorderly conducts. This percentage rate is 5% higher than what we saw in Farragut, or in fact, it was a little more than 5% of the actual rate. And with a density of 12 units per acre, this proposed development by Continental Properties would reflect a more intense law enforcement response compared to other areas of Farragut in terms of disorderly conducts. There are five other crimes categories that have a higher rate in apartments than they do in Farragut. These are burglary from motor vehicles, vandalism, theft, residential burglary, and other assaults. These rates are significantly higher, at least twice, from what law enforcement normally responds to within Farragut. These crimes are what more people sometimes think about when you mention apartment complexes. But the highest differential is the other assault category. They were 9 times more assaults in those apartment complexes than there were in Farragut. I've also come across a number of apartment crime websites on the web. I'd like to quote a statement from one of these sites. Even in the most desirable apartments, security is a concern. Often crimes are committed in apartments by those who have access to it, such as other tenants, maintenance people, and friends of tenants. So you may check your tenants, but that doesn't necessarily mean their friends have been checked. Criminals look for vulnerabilities. In conclusion, I would like you to know that I am not opposed to development within the town of Farragut, but what I'm opposed to is having apartments within 500 feet of my house. As I noted earlier, as I have lived near apartment complexes, and that is why I moved to Farragut, to get away from them. I am requesting that Planning Commission not approve this rezoning request. Thank you.
My husband Jack and I, Roseanne Kyle, are residents since 2008 of Waverly Court condominiums. I am also the outgoing secretary treasurer of our homeowners association there, which consists of 41 units.
Are you representing the homeowner association?
Not
or just
really. I'm
individually?
speaking on just behalf of me, but I wanted to quote a couple of things that I can from my experience as outgoing secretary treasurer.
That's fine.
And that is that we had our annual meeting on January the 15th of this year, at which time I was the secretary treasurer. And at that time, 30 of the 41 represented owners there strenuously opposed this rezoning. We discussed it at some length there, and then I've had personal discussions with the other 11 owners, and they also oppose. So we've got unanimous opposal of this rezoning by Waverly Court residents. The primary concerns of these owners were two: the adverse impact on our property values and the inconsistency of any multifamily development with the surrounding low-density developments such as Baldwin Park and Waverly Court, Fox Den, and particularly Ted Russell's mansion across the street from us. You know, that I don't know if Mr. Russell's here tonight. I haven't seen him, but we're willing to bet you that he would oppose it. Now, I also went to the trouble of looking at the public records for the 2013 Knox County appraisals of our properties of those surrounding areas, and ours, Waverly Court, is an average of $329,000. Ted and Drama Russell's is, as you can imagine, multi-million, 2.8 plus million with 14.88 acres. And then Baldwin Park, of the 39 reported units, is $389,000. Now, based on the CP's representatives' stated investment of $37 million a while ago with 236 units, that amounts to about an investment of $157,000. And that's for the total project, not just the unit itself. So you can see that the property value is considerably less per unit than all the surrounding areas. The BOMA minutes dated March the 12th. I applaud the adoption of the new architectural design guidelines. And in reviewing those on your website, I see that the architectural plans of the zoning applicant probably do not meet, and I defer if I'm wrong, to be consistent with the brick stone architecture of all the surrounding properties for that proposed development. The traffic impact, and she did dispute my supposition here, but I think that we will find that there will be considerable impact of folks turning right out of that development onto Kingston Pike and then right onto Smith Road as a cut through to I-40 and Campbell Station. And they're particularly at that low spot on Smith Road. I'm sure most of you are familiar with that grading situation there. It's going to create more of a hazard. We already have a significant hazard turning into Waverly Court, going either way. I'm always afraid. I'm scared to death that somebody is going to backside me, rear end me, when I have to stop to turn left into Waverly Court. And also when I turn right into Waverly Court coming from Kingston Pike. So I hope you'll consider whatever the percentage is. I don't care if it's 4 or 5 or whatever, it's going to create more risk. In fact, my husband and I suffered a severe accident at the corner of Kingston Pike and Smith Road, December 1st, 2012. My husband's still suffering greatly from that broadside accident going west on Kingston Pike. So please consider the impact, whatever percentage it is, when you make your decision. A very important thing, and I think that's already been alluded to at this point, is that your decision and BOMA's decision is going to set a significant precedent for future rezonings to R6, especially with the current criteria of the 12 units or 12, whatever it is, density. It's just certainly, I have to agree with Mr. Shipley, and I attended the meeting between the staff, and CP, and was pleased to hear Mr. Shipley state, as he did tonight, that there are more opportune places, like in the town center area, to fulfill the requirements for medium to higher density than in a residential neighborhood, upscale neighborhoods such as ours. Last but certainly not least, Farragut citizens have spoken several times already, and this is just another time in favor of preserving Farragut's unique, separate commercial and residential developments. Putting an apartment complex there is certainly bordering on commercial, because that is their primary goal, is profit orientation. There can be no doubt about that. The cases I'm talking in point are the Panda Express situation and the Grigsby Chapel situation. Even though the R6 rezoning might be, at this point, consistent with Farragut's comprehensive land use plan, first and foremost, as already stated here tonight, you're representatives who make decisions on behalf of the citizens of Farragut. If you can't answer yes to the question, would I like my property next door to be zoned R6, then I urge you not to force such a change in use and architectural character on the residents of Waverly Court, Baldwin Park, Fox Den, and others. I thank you so much for your time and consideration of such a precedent-setting matter.
I know I guess all the speakers so far have been very eloquent in presenting their views. Are there other speakers that have any, I'll say, additional type comments, or maybe if it's to echo something, we can be a little briefer, but if you have a new point you'd like to make, we'll definitely want to hear that. Can you identify yourself?
My name is Barbara Frola, and I live in Waverly Court, and I'd like to reference something specific. I've lived in Waverly Court for a year and a half, and before then, I spent a year and a half in what could be considered an upscale apartment complex in Knoxville. And although there were screening processes to make sure that the residents were what they were supposed to be, this was not always the case. But the one thing I would like to talk about is lighting. And you mentioned that lighting would be no problem. But I can tell you from living in an apartment, it was very difficult to tell the difference between night and day, even in the apartment. So you can imagine what it's going to be like in that area before any trees are mature enough to change that. And this is one thing I just wanted to, I'm not going to go into anything else that others have brought up, but I am against it. And there are some concerns that need to be dealt with. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Drew McDonald. I'm a vice president of the Fox Den Homeowners Association. And some folks have already alluded to the traffic issue. I'll just give you one quick personal study. Went down to Peterson Road, hung a left on Kingston Pike, assuming that I was going to go to I-40 via that route. There are 6 traffic lights and 2 left turns from Peterson Road. You go past Federal Boulevard, then you turn left at Campbell Station, which is a particularly long light because there is a ton of traffic. Then you hit the light at Heron Road, and then another light at Old Colony Parkway, and finally the Grigsby Chapel intersection, which is also a fairly long light, none of which are coordinated in this part of town. So for us to imagine that these 236 apartment unit dwellers are going to turn left and go down Kingston Pike versus taking one quick right turn at Peterson Road and one quick right at the Walgreen right turn lane and go zinging up Smith Road, the problem that we had in the last rezoning argument was the traffic that was going to back up past St. John Newman. Well, now it's going to be just the same. You've got 236 apartments piling down Smith Road. It's a 2-lane road, guys. Till you widen it to 4, it's still a 2-lane road, even with the traffic calming islands. Actually, I like the islands myself. And finally, I'd just like to echo the other neighborhoods. All 390 residents, pretty much to a word, in Fox Den are opposed to this for all the same reasons. I have here 75 signed individual petition named persons who live in our neighborhood or live in Farragut. By the time the Board of Mayor and Aldermen meet, this will probably be double or triple. Thank you for your service to the community. Please listen to your citizens. We want this Farragut to remain a beautiful place to live. And I didn't invest what I invested on South Foxton Drive to see apartments a block from my house. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm John Holstrager. Live at 345 Bernie Circle in Baldwin Park. I'm here at the request of the Baldwin Park HOA Board. Mike Wilson is also serving in that capacity. He spoke earlier. Baldwin Park is opposed to this rezoning of this parcel to R6. My question for the Planning Commission is, what is the significant public benefit of rezoning this parcel to R6? That's not a rhetorical question. I'd like to know your response. Anyone?
Well, since you're bold enough to ask, I'll be bold enough to answer. And we don't need to get our crime statistics to change tonight, so I ask you to be gentle. As I look at this, and I'll offer some other commentary, I have to be honest. I have been surprised at the level of negativity towards the project. When I first saw a drawing of this, quite frankly, I thought it was in a great spot and would bring value to our community. As we look at the town of Farragut, we want to make sure that we do have housing available for a variety of different citizens. Well, I'm answering the question, so, yeah. As I look at it, I do think multifamily housing does bring value to a town. As I look at, within my own personal situation, as I look towards the future, I could see a day where my sons want to move back to this community, and this would be a good place for them. I can see the day when my wife and I are empty nesters, and we would look at something like this and say, this is nice. When
you asked me to answer.
Yeah, I'm just answering your question. So usually I'm not the one that get booed, so this is a great opportunity. So when I look at this, some of the things, and I can't. Everybody's opinion is theirs, and everybody's opinion is accurate. When I look at this, at the end of the day, as many of you have said, our job is to represent the citizens, and I respect that. And one of the things that we've always prided ourselves on here is being able to to disagree without being disagreeable. So, as I've received a ton of emails, interestingly enough, the last time I had this many people in the audience and this much feedback involved a church in our town. So it's been several years ago. But, I'll just offer some perspective. I don't remember which individual it was, but somebody asked if I would live next to this. And I can say I would. I actually have lived next to an apartment in the past, and it certainly wasn't this far away. If there was 30 feet from my house to the apartment, I would be dumbfounded. Strangely enough, I never had a house that I've owned that sold faster and where I made more money. Now, every situation is different. There's been a lot of good research done here. The gentleman, I can't remember, I apologize, I got so many names written. You, the guy. You had great statistics, and you obviously did your homework. When you look at, and I don't have data laying in front of me, so I'm not going to be bold enough to say that, but as I look at the apartments that we have in our community today, to the best of my knowledge, we've not had any, I'm not aware of any difference in crime statistics between that and our standard homes. If there is, then I'm not stating that as a fact, but rather just an observation. When I hear about the schools, I have to be honest. Of all the arguments I hear, I think that's the weakest one, and I'll tell you why. I live in Fox Run subdivision. When there was all the conversation about rezoning a few years ago, and it ended up being Hardin Valley Academy, some of you are familiar with. Every phone call I had, every phone call was, oh, the housing values are going to they're going to go right in the toilet. And you know what? Didn't happen. And in fact, there's been no impact. So there's no measurable difference. The traffic, the Cannon and Cannon does an outstanding job. When we as a town want a traffic study, they're the go-to people. So whether we're looking at traffic patterns for a project, or we're looking at traffic patterns for our community as a whole in regards to road work and changes, they're very admirable folks. I just have been surprised, but I really do think something like this would bring value to our town. I actually work right next to this particular location. So I understand the concerns, but to answer your question, I think in the long run, we're seeing housing changing. If you look at, off of McPhee Road, I'm drawing a blank. What's the name of the?
Cottages.
Thank you, the cottages at Price Farm. When that first came in, we had a fair amount of objection to housing like that. A project we just did some rezoning on here earlier off of, was that Turkey Creek Road? Yeah, Turkey Creek Road. That is a different type of housing than what most of you live in, as far as I know. And so there is a value to a community in general to have a variety of housing. So is this the right spot? Is this the right time? Is this the right place? Well, I'm not here to argue that with you. I'm simply trying to answer the question that you laid out. So
Thank you for your opinion. I'm not hearing that there is a significant public benefit that would cause you to say yes to R6 rezoning here. Certainly would be open to owner-occupied of any flavor on that parcel in the future, but certainly not apartment buildings. It would also, I think, be open to apartments around city center. I think that would be consistent with the plan. So I'm going to sit down, but first I'm going to leave you with just a factoid. Continental Properties has said that they do screening and they require their residents to have income equivalent to 300% of the rent. So let's do some simple math. That means that two people living in one of these apartments can earn $10.80 an hour each. That's the kind of residence that we'll have in those apartments, because when you set the bar that low, that's what you're going to have. We appreciate a no vote, and just to help you folks kind of understand the amount of opposition in the room, could those opposed to this stand, please, and those standing, raise your hands. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.
2 seconds.
2 seconds. One,
You might
two.
have your point of view. We are the ones who are the citizens, and we ask you no. That's our mandate.
I understand. I'm not here to argue with you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mull, M-U-L, Wyman, W-Y-M-A-N. I live at 528 Wyndham Hall Lane, right off of Grigsby Chapel Road. I'm here tonight at the request of the homeowners to briefly ask you some questions and the consultant about the traffic impact study. The first question I have, figure 2 of the study, which is the conceptual site plan, is actually showing 3 driveway connections. The first driveway connection is at Peterson Road, just north of Peterson Road in Kingston Pike, which provides access to the Ingalls Shopping Center. The second driveway is shown as a proposed access to the Farragut Press site and a structure behind the main building there. The third access is right before you come into the proposed project. And my question is, are these recommendations in the traffic impact study for access for the remaining 45 acres of the total of 65 acres, and also access to the Farragut Press site. Okay. The study is showing 200.
Harold, did you give an answer or what? Mo, you said okay, and so I thought maybe somebody gave you an answer.
Keep that drawing up because I don't have that one.
Okay, right here. You can mark.
All right. What?
Brad Salisbury with Cannon and Cannon, 8550 Kingston Pike. Tilt this up. Yes, that's the Ingles property.
Okay. You really need to address the planning commission.
That's a driveway to the Farragut Press. And this is a stub to the remaining 45 acres. That's correct.
Okay.
The study is showing 236 units that will generate, this is table 2 in the study, it's on page 12. 236 units that will generate an average weekday trip, total trips per day of 2,064 trips per day. This is on a 24-hour period, average weekday. It's the critical column. Not the average annual, but the average weekday, Monday through Friday, because that's when most of the traffic occurs, as you well know. And it's showing 1,032 trips entering and 1,032 trips exiting during that 24-hour period. Now, we know at peak time there are 118 trips in the morning and 168 in the evening. But don't forget about the remainder of those trips that are not in the AM or the PM. There are 3 signalized intersections currently: Peterson, Kingston Pike, Federal Boulevard, and Kingston Pike. And I can't remember the other one. Smith, okay, yeah, Smith, okay. How could I forget that? Anyhow, the scope of this traffic study is specifically for these 20 acres and the 236 apartments. And the study says that there will be no significant adverse impact. It doesn't say there won't be any adverse impact. It says no significant adverse at the 3 intersections. But look out in the horizon a little bit. Okay, we got 45 acres remaining, okay? Now, gentleman just said that there's a stub into that remaining 45 acres. We don't know what will be built there. But I can tell you one thing right now. If the rezoning is approved, they're waiting for the gate to open. Okay? Now, the Tennessee Department of Transportation does traffic counts each year. Specifically, in February of each year, they do traffic counts on Grigsby Chapel Road, right near the Greenway crossing. They do traffic counts at the intersection of where Smith Road makes a bend, 90-degree bend, and Grigsby Chapel. They do a traffic count there. And there's also a traffic count 100 feet north, immediately north of the intersection of Smith Road and Kingston Pike. So, if you're turning onto Smith Road heading north, you go 100 feet north, you're just a little bit past Weigels, okay? All right, for 2014, and by the way, the trips that I'm going to give you are 2014. Now, the 2015 trips have not yet been published, and the reason for it is that anybody that works for DOT is up in Cumberland County right now
trying to trip branches that fell on the road on I-40 up there. So they haven't done the counts yet. Now, I'm being a little bit facetious, but I don't know if you've been that way or not on I-40, but believe me, there's going to be enough mulch for the next 10 years. Anyhow, Smith Road at Kingston Pike, 100 feet north of the intersection. 2014, 7,021 trips on an average weekday, okay? 7,021 at that intersection. Smith Road at Grigsby Road intersection, 2014, 5,092. So combined at those two intersections, there's over 12,000 trips. But wait, don't go home yet. Grigsby Chapel Road at the Greenway crossing, 16,499 average weekday trips. Combine that, there's over 28,000 trips per day, Smith Road, Grigsby Chapel Road corridor. That's as much as there is at Campbell Station, Parkside, Grigsby Chapel intersection, and Kingston Pike. So there is an impact, ladies and gentlemen, and we need to keep that in mind. That over 2,000 that's coming out of this 236 units are going to add to that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mike. Are there any other comments?
I'm John Cox. My wife and I have lived in the Farragut area since the late 70s. I live at 200 Winged Foot Point in Fox Den. I just have a little perspective I'd like to just ask the commission that I didn't hear here so far, and that is, I guess the question is, why do we post something to ask about a rezoning? I think it's to get feedback from the people so the commission can hear it, and I would think that there's been very little feedback that I've heard here today for anything other than rejecting this proposed change. So I again ask the commission to think about why we post and the feedback that you're getting, and you're supposed to respond to that. Otherwise, what is the posting used for? Thank you.
I will keep this very brief. I apologize. My name's Sarah Johnson. I'm here with Continental Properties as well with Gwen. I've been taking notes, and I just want to put in a few pieces of correction or clarification on some of the items addressed tonight. These aren't really in any particular order other than the way they were presented with the neighbors. School-age children, I know that folks can argue one way or the other. This comes up as a common misperception and other developments, but I did very quick math, and I think it's a moot point with our 236 units on 20 acres and the low percentage based on studies, not just internally, of about that 5%, versus if you look at 20 acres on the low end of the comprehensive plan, if you assume 6 single-family units per acre and the percentage of school-age children brought about by single family, you're looking at, rough to no change between the multifamily that we're proposing and the single family on the low end that could be built there. Public benefit, I know that question came up quite a bit. There's obvious things you can see in the site plan, the trail system that we're proposing to integrate into our community on the east and the south sides of the site. And then from a broader perspective, through the comprehensive plan and the vision of the town of increasing those housing options for the community, I see that as a huge public benefit, offering that different housing option to allow various different demographics to move in. That young professional that we say we kind of cater to and that is appealed to our type of community. Someone who has a good job out of college, doesn't want to put money down on a mortgage, but wants to see what the town of Farragut has to offer. And they may like what they see and may choose to pursue a home in Farragut, but this is giving them an opportunity to move into your town and see what the town has to offer. Architectural guidelines, just very briefly, I think when presented this in the presentation, but we do adhere to those architectural guidelines that were recently discussed and passed. The lighting, I know Barbara from Waverly Court brought up lighting, and Brad from Cannon and Cannon may have some more details on this, but there's a significant grade change from the properties north of us and east of us to our site. So really what the folks north of us would be seeing from their respective properties would be more of a roof line of our buildings. There's about a 20-foot drop, and with the lighting requirements at 20 feet in height maximum, that's not going to be protruding or carrying over to the adjacent properties. Traffic, again, I don't have the report in front of me, but I do want to just stress again that we hired a consultant. We weren't making these numbers up. We hired a consultant to take a look at the traffic generation from our proposed development and how it would impact the existing level of service. The traffic engineers take a look at it basically like a report card, and they grade it A through F, and they are saying that the level of service, we're not saying there's no net change. We're not being naive to the fact that 236 apartment units are not going to bring some additional cars. What that traffic consultant takes a look at, and at the intersection that we'd be presenting to tie into on Peterson and Kingston, and the adjacent intersections with lights, is that there's not a negative change in service. That level of service that exists today would remain in effect post our development. I think those are the only notes I had, but again, obviously Gwen and I are available if you have any other questions. Thank you.
Harold, you want to make?
Thank you. I appreciate the comments on our services, and we did do something right in that whoever liked the islands, we did them. Okay. Couple of follow-ups very quickly. Since the time, I'm sorry, Harold Cannon with Cannon and Cannon, 8550 Kingston Pike. Thank you. Since the time that many of us were in apartments, in fact, just probably in the past 10 to 15 years, there's been a significant focus on site lighting, and not just the site lighting as it serves the site, but what they've deemed light pollution, if you will, for surrounding properties. This town has been at the forefront of making sure that it has stringent lighting requirements so that adjoining property owners are not impacted by this lighting. A lot has changed in lighting. Heck, a lot has changed in just the past 5 years. She is correct. That is being given considerable consideration to meet or exceed the town's requirements to make sure that off-site the neighborhoods are not impacted by this. The second, on the level of service, and she said it much better than I ever will. There were some very high numbers thrown out, and I sure am not going to say that his math is wrong by any means, and tomorrow morning I'm going to check that. But part of what you have liked about the islands along that roadway is the fact that it does limit the amount of traffic that can come through there. That was the wish of this body through here. Excuse me. That was the wish of this body through here. There was discussions about adding lanes. The goal was to reduce the speed, traffic calming, and through that there is a reduction in the amount of traffic that can go through there and maintain a reasonable level of service. That is how this study has been analyzed, is through the level of service. You're correct. What happens on the adjoining acreage, we don't know. But I can also guarantee you that this body here will be looking at an identical traffic impact study to see what its impacts might be, what it will be to the level of service. And if that level of service begins to decline, then there will be a lot of discussion by this body, because you've done it in the past, and rightly so, as to whether that particular development is approvable. She is correct. the level of service is not impacted by this. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I want to into the, I guess, the comment period now. I think we've heard from both homeowners associations as well as associated individuals as well as the applicant. So we're going to move to the next agenda item.
Before you do that, I do have a piece of good news that you may have missed, and this is not exactly on the subject, but it will touch on something that somebody pointed out tonight, and that is that if you didn't see the news, I'll tell you that we got a grant from the governor for $250,000 for the project to synchronize our red lights throughout the town. So the six lights you have to go through to get over to I-40 may be all green. That's the hope. But anyway, that project will be starting pretty soon. So let's see how it turns out.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That is some good news. We're going to go, let's see. Everybody want to continue, or we want to take a short break? Okay. We'll go to,
Hey, Mark, when is this going to be on the agenda for rezoning? Next time. Do these people know that?
About that. This will be on our agenda at the April meeting, which is the third Thursday in the month.
Yeah, this, before you leave, there will be an ordinance and resolution prepared for next month, so they will be asked to take a vote on up or down on this rezoning request. So just so you know, and I think that's April 16th, I believe, the third Thursday.
Third Thursday in April.
So.
Oh, no. The next item on the agenda, folks, if we could, you all could move on out and hold your discussions in the rotunda. We want to continue the meeting.
Good luck.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Microphone, but it would be really ugly.
It's on, but I think. Folks, will you all move to the rotunda if you want to continue your discussions? We want to continue the meeting, and we can't hear ourselves here.
And we want to go home too, so.
Next item on the agenda is a discussion on a request to rezone parcel 36, tax map 142, 12422, Union Road, 25.75 acres from R2 to R1/OSR, Homestead Land Holdings LLC applicant.
Okay.
Can we be quiet in the rear, please, while you exit? Mark?
Yeah, let me just give you a brief overview of this. This is, of course, a workshop item similar to the previous item because there are some issues that need to be discussed. It's a 25-acre tract off of the eastern section of Union Road. That's between Everett and Smith Road. This property, as far as its physical characteristics, it has two drainages on the north and south sides of the property, and the middle is relatively open, where the old home site and barn and kind of a cleared area for the most part. What they're requesting to do, this property is currently zoned R2, general single family. The applicant's requesting to have it rezoned to R1 open space residential overlay. From a staff's perspective, in terms of just the property itself, we feel that that's a very good designation for the property. It's probably the best residential designation you could have for that piece of property. to capitalize and to leave alone those stream areas and incorporate those into the 35% open space that's required in this in zoning district. It is consistent, the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan in terms of the use that's shown in the plan versus what they're requesting. The real issue with the property is that it, I'm sure all y'all know, it fronts on a section of roadway that does not meet the town's specifications that are provided for in the subdivision regulations, nor does it have any complete street components. So, the staff certainly feels that any rezoning approval for the property or development of the property under its current zoning designation, we would strongly recommend that Union Road would have to be improved to the specifications of the subdivision regulations and incorporate the complete street provisions that have been adopted through the town. It's about, I don't know how much distance it is. I think it's about, let's see here. It's about 1,200 feet from their southern frontage of their property to Smith Road, and that would be the closest road that would, be a significant road that Union ties into. But that is something that needs to be discussed, and that's why this is a workshop discussion. The image before you was related to the item earlier that you referenced would be discussed as part of this rezoning, and that's the concept plan for the Union Grove subdivision development. This is what it would develop as if it were rezoned to R1 OSR. With that, I think the applicant's here, and there may be some residents along this roadway as well, so I'll be happy to answer any questions. Oh, can you please go to the mic?
Judy Steenbach, 616 Augusta National Way. Obviously, this is not the same scope as the apartment building complex. However, it does impact on a number of residents facing the property. Our main concern, obviously, is part of the upgrade to Union so that it meets the standards of the town, which would be the responsibility of the developer. I think in the past the town has assumed too many responsibilities and let the developer walk on his own and gain his profits and take a walk. I think those days should be over. We have issues of sewage. Look what happened in Choteau. We didn't tax them, and we had to build a larger sewer plant. I think these are issues we have to still consider because Farragut is growing with leaps and bounds. This property is going to add 47 more homes. That's 47 more thousand flushes a day. Who is going to pay for that? Are we going to pay for it, who have been paying for our sewage all these years, or should the newcomers foot a little bit of the bill? That aside, I have a question regarding this. There are easements on this map, and I have been told that this map is only a proposal. So everything here is not written in stone. So it's kind of a moot point. Is it real or not? My question is, there are 2 easements for sewer lines. However, a walking path extends from Union all the way down and extends onto Augusta National Way's property. How can you have an open walk that the town is going to maintain going onto private property?
I believe you're misreading the map, ma'am.
Then why are the lines drawn down here?
That's the center line of the existing creek. That's a buffer zone around the creek that's not to be disturbed.
Okay, it says proposed wet bank line, where is it? Where are the walking trails?
There's not any proposed walking trails because and we can have this conversation at concept review. That's really, we're talking about the rezoning right now and not the actual merits of the plan. But given that these sensitive areas on the other side of the creek, we thought it best to leave them in their natural state and protected rather than cut across the creek to put walking trails over there.
All right, my last question is, according to the town rules that I've heard tonight, there has to be a 50-foot buffer between the property line and the development of a new construction. Is that correct?
There's a 50-foot peripheral building setback in the zoning district that they're requesting, and Russ shows that on this plan. And there's not a requirement for a buffer strip in this zoning district. It can be required by the Planning Commission. It's optional. But in terms of the walking trails, your earlier question, that's one of the reasons why the staff, would strongly recommend that the improvements be made to Union Road, because that would be the pedestrian facilities that would satisfy the requirement for this development. We agree with the applicant, and we wouldn't want to see walking trails going through those drainage areas everywhere, because that would defeat the very purpose of this zoning designation, to try to provide for open space and protect those sensitive areas.
All right, well, my last request is, there are approximately 5 houses which are basically impacted by this development. I ask that you consider the 50-foot buffer. We have enjoyed this beautiful pasture with 3 horses or 4 horses for a very long time. We have to give it up, but let's give it up reasonably. I don't want to look at my neighbor and wave from my swimming pool. I would like my privacy, and I'm sure each one of my neighbors feels the same. So I would like that taken into deep consideration. Thank you for your time.
We kind of got a little out of order here, but no, you're fine. I want to give the applicant a chance to address their proposal, and then we'll take any additional comments.
Okay. My name's Russ Rackley with Rackley Engineering, representing the developer that's part of this application. And the owner of the property will speak, but I want to address a couple of engineering technical things she mentioned. She mentioned about the cost of sewer, or whether or not the sewer plant can handle the sewer and needs to be upgraded. First Utility District is the sewer provider. The town has nothing to do with the sewer. Everybody who is connected to the sewer pays for the sewer and its upgrades and needs through their monthly sewer bill and water bill. It's a self-supporting entity. All the new infrastructure for any development is called owner-dedicated infrastructure. The developer pays to put all that utility in the ground and then gives it to the utility company. Okay, so there's no cost impact as it relates to utilities. That really the only thing. There's water along Union. There's 2 sewer lines that run along. Actually, this property has a sewer easement along both creeks. So this property owner had already given First Utility District permission to cross those creeks for your development and other developments around the property. So there's sewer on the property. As it relates to a buffer, keep in mind that this rezoning, we're asking to downzone it to a lower density, a density that matches your neighborhood. So this neighborhood will be identical to your neighborhood. So being concerned about your view out your back door is saying you're being concerned about the view of your existing neighbors too. So I just think you should keep that in mind. But I'd like to let the owner of the property speak.
I'm Kim Knott. I'm one of the 4 siblings of the Huntley property and executor for the estate. But for all of you neighbors, this is a sad time for us, but it's also inevitable. And I've grown up on that property, and I've been there since 1958. And you all wouldn't be in your houses if Dad had not sold half that farm years ago to be developed into a subdivision. And half the golf course wouldn't be there either if it weren't for us. And Dad knew this day was coming for all of us kids, that we would have to sell this property. It's for our inheritance. It's the only inheritance I have. And for years ago, he had it zoned R2. So it's already zoned for development, and we're only asking that it be lessened to a lesser. And it's also been appraised, the property, for best use of land, which is development. And I just want to clear that up. But anyway, and would really like to get this going, you know, with the public hearing and everything, and need to get this voted on, because closing is coming pretty soon. And, you know, we just, it's something that we four have already submitted our letter to Mark asking for the rezoning. We're all in agreement, and as property owners, we've asked for that. So, anyway.
One thing to keep in mind just on this zoning district is the density is less as a whole, but the lot sizes are smaller than they would be in Fox Den, for example. Because the idea is to cluster the development on the more developable portions of the property. And again, from my perspective, I think that's the best zoning for this property. I think that's a good designation for it. But just to be clear, those lot sizes are going to be, in some cases, significantly smaller than what you see in regular single-family residential R2.
Michael Kelly. I'm a lawyer with Kennelly, Montgomery & Findlay, and I'm here on behalf of the applicant. Mr. Rackley has spoken a little bit. I do want to emphasize that this is a downzoning. We are downzoning. The proposal is to downzone the property from R2, which is general single family, which has moderate density, to rural single family, which has low density. It will, as Mr. Shipley said, it will result in greater green space, open space. There'll be 35%. And it is a location where it fronts on that east section of Union Road between Everett and Smith. Procedurally, we were hoping, because although you have the zoning and then you separately have the concept plan, it was our hope that the actual zoning vote would be tonight. And if that is possible to do, we would, and the owner would request, I think, that because our situation is such that, as she indicated, our client has an option on the property, and there is a limited period of time. Of course, if we get the zoning, it's still going to have to be approved on 2 readings by the mayor and board of aldermen. So procedurally, my first question is simply whether that can be done.
It takes somebody a little smarter than me, but I'm not sure that we can.
I'm sure since it's a rezoning request. The other one where we had more discussion was just literally, you know, changing a material.
I think it has to be posted.
I think it has to be posted and advertised to make everything.
So it hasn't. I looked in the paper. I didn't find a posting. So in order to comply with the open meetings law, you'd have to post it, and therefore would be, you anticipate on the April agenda?
That would be.
Yes, it would be on the April, yeah. Usually when you have a rezoning, unless it's just like the one with moving the property lines on the Smith property off of Turkey Creek Road, that was a no-brainer where there's no need for input or guidance for the staff on certain major issues. Usually rezonings are workshopped. That's very standard, that and text amendments. Just because the staff needs some direction in terms of how to prepare an ordinance or a resolution, and we need that from the public, and we need it from the planning commissioners. And obviously the biggest concern with this developing this property is not really the zoning, but it's the road, and the road is substandard, and the staff would recommend that it would have to be improved to Smith Road.
Does this create a problem for you?
The road cost?
The fact we had to post it and have another meeting.
And we would handle the concept plan as a second item in conjunction with that at that time. So
good, yes.
It does pose something of a problem. I mean, we were all anxious to get this piece of it done. The zoning piece, recognizing that the concept plan was separate. If legally you don't believe it can be done because it's not been posted, then
I'm pretty sure that's the case.
Okay.
But we can do special called meetings. But that's up to this board to decide.
How would we could talk to the owner about the timing. I know you only meet once a month.
A call meeting would be preferred if that is the best. Basically, we need
Well, the concern from the staff's perspective is that you can't separate the zoning from the road. I mean, that's the problem. I mean, you've got to have a discussion about the road in relation to any development of that property. And that's why it was workshopped, similar to Continental's item, and one subsequent to this item on the agenda that's also workshopped, because there's serious issues that need to be discussed.
Let me ask a couple of questions about the road issue, because, and I don't claim to have the final answer on this, but when I have looked at the R2 zoning requirement, Section 6A, which is for moderate density single family, specifically says that it should provide access to a street which meets the minimum design standards established in the Farragut subdivision regulations. But that is not the case with the description for R1. I mean, as you would expect, when you're having lower density, it in fact says that the intent of this zone is to provide for low density residential use in areas designated for the town, so and so and so and so, or public service considerations such as narrow and adequate collector streets impose high public dollar and environmental costs on intense urban development. So when I read those two provisions, it seems that the whole intent of an R1 zone is for a situation like this, where there is no requirement for upgrading a street. Now, I can understand staff's desire to do that, although I've looked at the street and it's a pretty well-maintained street. But I don't see, I'd be interested in what the legal authority is for requiring an owner or developer who's downzoning to this zone to make off-site road improvements.
Well, I mean, you know, obviously some of that could be a question for the town attorney. I'm not going to get into a legal discussion over things like that. I'll, defer those questions to our town attorney. There is language in both the R2 and the OSR which would trigger improvements to a road if it accessed a substandard street. There's general language in the OSR that basically says, that type of zoning, it has to comply with all adopted town plans and ordinances. And there's certainly plenty of policy statements that we've adopted through the Complete Streets, the pedestrian circulation plan, and other provisions in our subdivision regulations where you could tie improvements to an R1 OSR as well.
I did that same reading, and I that was the other place where I thought, well, where does the authority come to require these off-site improvements? And I don't find that in the OSR overlay either. But it would be beneficial to sort of have some direction about how to get that issue resolved.
Comments from the commission? I mean, particularly, we're not the funding body for anything. I'm not sure we.
Well, I would offer a couple things. First of all, I think in regards to the legal issue, I would recommend what Mark said. I'm sure our town attorney and staff can facilitate having that discussion to gain whatever clarity you think you need. In regards to timing, I think as a board, although it's rarely happened, I think we've always tried to be respectful of the needs of the people that come before us. And so I, for one, would have no problem looking at the possibility of a called meeting. So if we need to do that, it's a matter of making sure we can get the proper public notice and make sure we have the proper number of board members available to do the same. So again, you can coordinate that with the town staff, and they in turn will make us aware of potential opportunities to do that.
I want a motion onto that effect then.
What kind of time frame we talking about? How long does the posting have to be up?
Mark?
Well, I'd have to check the exact wording. It's different from the Board of Zoning Appeals. You know, it obviously has to be posted prior to the meeting, and I don't think there's a 7-day specification like there is with the BZA. I'll check into that. I mean, it could be accomplished, of course, prior to April's meeting, but I just have to look and see what the time frame would be.
I'm agreeable to a call meeting.
Well, I guess I'll keep it somewhat general. I'll make a motion that we defer this item to a future meeting, and then we can determine whether it's a called or the next meeting.
With all due respect, by defer this item, does that mean we have another discussion meeting, or do we have an actual vote meeting? Because the current item is a
That's a
discussion
good point of
item.
clarity. My intent would be
Right.
that we hold a
Vote on
vote.
the zoning, yeah.
Also, if I might add, I mean, I guess the reason for staff having this as a workshop item tonight, as Mark introduced the item, was to give staff direction on how to write the ordinance. And so I guess we've got to determine on some level, or at least this commission needs to give staff their opinion on how the commission
Sam,
sees it.
we can deal with what we're, you know, for part of the, trying to deal with not waiting on the next meeting as a part of this. And
Right.
then also, we still need to come to some
Right.
input back to Mark tonight.
Right.
Relative to that, so we're in a position
Okay.
to take some action.
Yeah, I mean, how do you all feel about the OSR for this property? That's a good question. I mean, that's the kind of the feedback that and the road that I was trying to look for.
Well, in regards to the two items that have been mentioned, I personally can support the rezoning. I also would like to see the road improved. I live near that particular area, so I take that road on occasion. And although I would agree with your comment that the road in general is in good condition, I would also state that the road is narrow, and it's as we would put some more traffic on that road, I would have concern. If there's a way for this body to create an opportunity to widen that road, I would work to take advantage of it.
On that road, as far as I'm concerned, is unsafe at any speed.
Mark, you good?
Well, other than Ron, I think made a motion to defer.
I'll get back to that in a minute.
Oh.
I'm talking about the input back to you. Do you feel like?
Yeah, that's helpful.
Okay.
Yes, it is. Mhm.
Okay, we have a motion for call for a special, for a meeting, a subsequent meeting. Second.
For vote.
Yes.
I second that, or, yes.
Seconds, we got several seconds. I think the mayor got there first.
If I could add one more thing, and this may be more directed at Mark, but I know one of his last comments on the concept plan was that it couldn't be heard because there were no road improvements shown on Union Road. Well, I've been through every plan that y'all have, except for the one I heard of tonight from Smoke called the Complete Streets Plan or something that I've never seen before. And at no point was there any, this is what is required from A to B. Engineering said meet our minimum subregs to Smith Road and sidewalks along the frontage. But then there's reference to the bike and ped plan, which covers 3 of the 4 classifications of street. It omits the coverage from a local collector, which is this section of Union Road, and that's a point I want to make. This portion of Union Road on the major road plan and on the Farragut Comprehensive 2025 plan both is classified as a local collector, unlike Everett Road and the western portion of Union Road, which are major collectors, which are clearly covered under the bike and ped plan with the defined cross-section exhibits of bike lanes and walking and all that. So if I'm to understand, Union Road needs to meet the minimum standards for its classifications according to the sub-regulations, then that gives me the guidance to provide something on a plan that says, here is the improvements to Union Road. But that was the reason for its omission on the submittal, is that we never had clear direction, just that some improvements would have to be made. The other part of that is that in order for our clients to determine whether or not they can afford to develop this property, we have to know what the cost implications are, obviously, of improving a road, because at some point it becomes untenable when you can't sell a Farragut home for 20% more than any other home in Farragut for the same home because of the road improvements out front. So, and all this, obviously, because of the time constraints and contractual relations for trying to purchase a property. We've been working with staff, the entire staff, since early January. Since early January, have had several meetings trying to get something figured out, and that brings us here tonight. So I appreciate y'all's attention to the matter, and hopefully we can get to a called meeting and get something resolved so we know whether we can move forward or not.
Okay.
My name's Andrea White, and I live at 12408 Union Road, and for many, many years, until the Huntleys sold the parcel between my home and their home where Kim grew up, we were neighbors, and the Huntleys have been wonderful neighbors. And I'm not here to speak against the development. I really don't know a lot about it, but I do want to emphasize I've lived there for almost 22 years, and the traffic through there has grown tremendously. And Alderman Honkin, you mentioned you drive that frequently, and you know how much traffic comes from Fox Run and uses that. With the traffic calming islands now over there on Smith Road, everybody uses our little road. It is an Indianapolis 500. There's only 5 or 6 homes on that road, and we don't generate a lot of traffic, but there's kids that drive like it's a speed demon, and some of the families that have small children aren't here tonight because it's spring break, and they've called the sheriff to ask for speed traps to be set up. And if you have the time between now and the next time you meet, I would suggest you drive and try to stop and turn in my driveway. That road is curvy, it's narrow, blind, coming around blind curves, hills. It's just to add 45 homes in the traffic. I think the improvement to Union Road is a must. And my property would be one of those where I would lose that frontage and the peaceful looking frontage, but in order for me to feel safe, when I'm like what Roseanne mentioned, when I try to turn into my home, I am praying that nobody's coming over that hill.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. So, Mark, we want to work together to.
Yeah, I'll take a look and see what we can come up with.
Thank you.
Discussion on that one? Because I had something I'd like to say. On discussion 11.
We're moving to the next item. Okay, but I mean, is it a brief? Is it something brief? Okay.
My name's Dennis Dean. I live at 12715 Union Road, but I'm also speaking for Rivers of Living Water Church, which is at 12506, which is next door to the development. My biggest concern there again is the road and the traffic. You'd be surprised as much as anything else how many people go into the cemetery that's there at that's got Civil War people in it. Mm-hmm. Right next to the creek that runs between our property and the Hundley property is a low bridge, no sides to it whatsoever. So it does make a very much of a dangerous situation for people driving through there. If you meet a car and you're at that bridge, one of you are going to stop or you're probably going to end up in the creek. And the traffic's not one going coming out of the subdivision, it'll go to Smith Road. That's not necessarily the case. Coming out of the subdivision to get to Lenore City, the most direct route is to turn left to go over to Everett Road. That's all I can.
Thank you.
May I make one quick comment?
On the same topic?
Yes, sir.
Briefly.
Briefly.
And then I won't cut off the comments because we're.
My name's Alan Galloway. I live at 605 Smith Road. My property borders the property that we're talking about on the northeast border of the property. My primary concern also is traffic. Living on Smith Road, over the years with all the developments along Everett, traffic has become horrible. And if you talk another 50 or so houses that are going to spill onto Smith Road and then onto Grigsby Chapel, I really wish you would look at the traffic and maybe consider doing something to force this traffic to Everett instead of diverting it back to Smith, which is just heavily traveled in the first place. Comment number one. Comment number two is the way the natural lay of the property is my property drains to this property, and this is probably more a question, I guess, for development. But once it starts to develop, I don't know what assurances I have as a property owner that my property won't turn into a pond once they start grading. I don't know if anybody can answer that.
The plans that we said we have the concept plan we'll be dealing with as part of the next meeting too. I mean, you see that. But the town engineer, they will submit information to the town engineer, and he and his staff will review that. Okay. And so that it's the regulations cover that for them to be reviewed to look at there being no downstream impact.
Okay.
To minimize that, there'll have to be whatever mitigation, retention type activities, whatever would apply for that development with the grades and their calculations on the flow rates and what have you. So that will be analyzed.
Thank
you. The next item is item 12, discussion on a request to amend the 2012 Comprehensive Land Use Plan for the property located at 12639 Kingston Pike, 30.13 acres, from medium-density residential and low-density residential to commercial. Horn Real Estate LLC applicant.
This is something that doesn't happen very often, but the applicant's requesting to have our future land use map amended for this particular piece of property. Currently, the property is split in terms of its designation on the future land use map. The lower, roughly 2/3 of the property, let me pull it up here. Again, I don't have the smart board tonight, unfortunately, but the lower 2/3 of the property in brown is medium density residential, and the upper northern third or so of the property is low density residential, which in the context of the land use plan is 3 to 6 units per acre. Their request is for that entire area, and this excludes the floodplain. That's open space designation. But the non-floodplain portion of the property to go to a commercial designation, which would allow it then to be rezoned to general commercial or planned commercial, either one. When the comprehensive plan was being formulated in 2012, this property was seen as a potential candidate for maybe a small apartment development or attached single family that could capitalize on that floodplain as an amenity for the residents. It was seen as a good kind of transitional use from Kingston Pike to Union Road. And so that was kind of the logic initially of having that as medium density residential. The northern part was left in a lower density residential to again transition to Union Road and Fox Run and Saddle Ridge there on Union Road. And as you know, the transition concept is heavily noted in the comprehensive plan, and that was what that was trying to accomplish. Related to some of the discussion we had with the Continental request, as you know, recently we've made a number of amendments to the zoning ordinance to try to encourage the development of a downtown here around the town hall. And I mentioned earlier, key to that is going to be getting, in my opinion, a lot of residents living within walking distance of that downtown. So, you know, having other areas outside of the mixed-use town center designated for potentially apartment projects is something that we do need to think about, and maybe try to, at least from the staff's perspective, prioritize the probably somewhat limited market for multifamily for, you know, our mixed-use town center area. So from a staff's perspective, amending the Brown area to a commercial designation we think is reasonable. You have Renaissance and you have the 4-story bank building on the south side of Kingston Pike. And another request that would be reasonable would be to go to institutional. That's the kind of the bluish gray that's west of this property, and that's really the predominant designation on the future land use map for properties west of the Swan property. So either one of those, I think, on that front portion would seem to be reasonable and consistent with the surrounding plan of development. The kind of the question and the reason this is kind of discussed tonight is what are the thoughts on, well, you may not even agree with what I just stated, but clearly the staff does have some concerns about going to a commercial designation all the way to Union Road. As you know, the western side of Union Road is substantially substandard. The applicant is, you know, very early on, they're looking at, and we would certainly strongly support this because it's in the comprehensive plan, constructing a public street along the western portion of the property that would go to Union Road. That helps promote connectivity. That's you know, one of the strategies in our land use plan. It provides people with different options to get in and out of places. Emergency service providers, it enhances their ability to you know, access properties in the event of an emergency. But you know, from my perspective, I think looking at how to deal with that northern portion of that tract, and then also that section of Union Road. It's a, you know, very narrow road, 14 to 15 feet wide in most places once you get west of Fox Run. And you know, the staff is very concerned about adding any more, you know, any project that would add any more traffic to that substandard section of roadway. So I think those two things I'll throw out there for discussion, and I think the applicant's here as well, if you have any questions specific to what they're looking for.
Applicant like to.
Yeah, thanks. We'll keep this short. I'm Doug Horn. I live at 12103 South Fox Den, and John Baker of our organization is with me as well. We're representing actually the Swan brothers, Paul Russell Swan and Bill Swan. We have an option to buy the property, and John can give us a little bit more detail about our plans here.
I'm John Baker with Horn Properties. Right now our intention, our plan is we're looking more of a light retail, kind of a grocery type format facing the Kingston Pike area as represented on the plan above. We are doing a service road. We've not done a traffic study at this point in time to see what kind of level of service this center is going to provide, but we do know that connecting up to Union will help relieve from the existing residences as another access point out, signalized once DOT does subject to approve that right at Kingston Pike. That's kind of our element right now. There is a creek line that divides the site. I know there's been during an earlier workshop, we had some concern on whether we would impact that creek. We would not have any adverse impact or additional drainage into that creek. We would hold all storm detention on site. But like Mr. Horn said, we are very preliminary at this time. We are marketing to 2 to 3 different grocery tenants, which are showing some interest. So that's what our first stages of this rezoning process and the land use plan.
I do have a question for you, and it might just be semantics, but when I read the application here, it says, describe the amendment's benefit to the town, retail use services for the residences, and assisted living benefits for the community. Is that, what do you mean by assisted living benefits?
We are projecting, and C1 encompasses that. We have a potential behind the retail component of putting an assisted living in.
Oh,
that is our projection.
You're looking at this parcel then that would be immediately behind the proposed supermarket between that and Union Road, is that?
Yes, sir, that's
Okay.
correct.
All right, thank you.
Can this area support another supermarket?
Yes, it can. There's zonings on, there's they do evaluations through the town, and they do a radius plan. Like Kroger, for instance, the existing Kroger, you'll go out 2 miles, they do a plan, and they figure out how many houses, how many people live in that area, and they do a level of service on how many more they can support. In this part of the community, other than Ingalls, there's no other grocery community in this area. So from Frock's Run to all the locals in that area would probably shop at this location on a small format type store. Kind of like a neighborhood market format is what we're looking at. No, it'd be like a neighborhood market or a smaller type format. I don't want to name any names because we're not at that level at this point.
40 to 50,000
Yes,
square
sir.
foot.
That's correct.
Like that. Whereas Kroger, I think, is over 100.
That's correct. It's not a Kroger type format.
What we're looking at, this whole discussion, it comes back down to Union Road.
Yeah, that's a big part of it.
That whole, for any of these projects to work, that road has to be substantially improved, in my opinion. I mean,
Staff's opinion, yes.
Or any of these projects will work, so. I think that needs to be seriously considered.
Sir, of course, the road that we proposed on the west side of the property would alleviate, honestly, in my opinion, I don't think we could afford to go all the way down Union Road to Fox Run. And pay commercial price for the property. That we thought if we put the road on the west side for people coming down Union either way and then turn and go down to the traffic signal, that'd be our contribution, for traffic. But I don't think we could afford to buy it
I'm saying that road it's going to have to be improved.
I understand.
From Everett down to, what is it, Way Station?
Yes, sir. I understand what you're saying.
I'm not even arguing but I mean, that road that whole thing needs to be done. It can't be done in 100-foot sections,
Yes, sir.
Make any difference.
But all I'm saying, the economics of a project like a food store with some retail shops and maybe an outlot use, some retail use, if we put that road on the west side, there's no way it would work number-wise to expand that road all the way down, put over the bridge culvert there over that creek, and it'd probably be another $1.5 million or so cost. That's why we're here, to see what the commission's thought is on the zoning, because if we can't get the zoning, unless if it's tied to the widening of Union Road, I don't think we could. I think we'll drop the contract. Just being honest. Of course, I know it doesn't matter to you, but we probably, for our private interest, we'd have to drop it. It just doesn't work economically. But see, the road on the west side obviously would alleviate a lot of traffic on Union Road.
Much cure about that. I know that road, that section of the road, it's been mentioned by the people who live out there, I'm surprised we haven't had people killed out there already.
I agree.
And Doesn't make any difference whether,
Yeah.
but if you're gonna add more traffic, it's certainly, before you do any adding of any traffic, it has to be taken care of.
Okay.
One way or another,
I understand.
in my opinion.
But what this request, and it obviously is related to the rezoning, because it's a separate item, but is, how do y'all feel about the future land use map and what it calls for on currently versus what they're requesting? And again, I personally don't have a problem with the front 2/3, the brown area, being either commercial or institutional. I think that's consistent with the plan of development out there, especially since we're trying to promote, apartment development or medium density residential somewhere around the town hall. But that yellow area north of that was really kind of a little bit troubling for me to go to commercial all the way back to Union. Now, it's true that zoning goes all the way back to Union on a number of properties west of this one. So it wouldn't be inconsistent necessarily with existing zoning. But again, as Ed brings up, that Union Road is always kind of out there as an issue.
Because I'm not opposed to the commercial on that front 2/3. It gives me pause to think about the back portion there and transition with the residential back there. But I don't know what you all looked at the project. You talked about another future project in the back, and whether your project works in that 2/3 area or not. I don't have enough.
We're very preliminary. It's
Yeah.
just, we have a sparked interest. There's nothing informal. Right now, our first level is the grocery.
I understand. But yeah, I'm
I'm kind of in that same spot. I can
front
support the
2/3.
front real easy. I've got to think a little bit more about the back. But the front, I like the concept. I can see this spot from where my house is. So I think there's great potential for the front piece. Again, the back, I just need to think about. So.
And I do like the concept of the road extension there on Union. And
I'm Dennis Dean. I live directly at 12715 Union Road, which is directly across from the backside of that property. Major concern, once you pass Fox Run, where there was a widened road right past it for that subdivision, you come on down, you've got a culvert there that's a narrow bridge that's got about a embankment about that much on each side. I am surprised. I hear all kinds of tires squealing all the time of people going through there. My concern is if you put another outlet, street, whatever, going from there to Kingston Pike, people from Fox Run are going to use Union Road to get through that one, to keep from going through the traffic light at Everett Road. Coming the other way is going to be some of the same problems. I respect what they're trying to do, but I'm also trying to say that's a dangerous set of road right through there. And from all indications, I've heard everything else down Union Road on the north side is probably going to go residential, because it's residential from Fox Run over to Saddle Ridge. I would not expect it to be different. So then you just put the street to Kingston Pike, you just add more people and more issues right there. Thank you.
Is it your plan to connect the road from Kingston Pike up to Union Road? Or
Yeah.
are you going to stub it off?
Our plan would be to connect to Union Road. And our intention initially was to provide relief for Union Road down to Kingston Pike as another outlet. Because there's going to be a level of service requirement by TDOT in order to justify that signalization. And by tying in the residents as a relief point, along with what we're proposing here, and that's the natural location for a signal and an existing curb cut across to Old Stage Hills.
That would be true, except the extra traffic is automatically forced on Union Road to get to that traffic.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
dealing with the land use plan and the zoning, so we're not down to actually approving all the constraints for the development yet, or anything like that, so.
I mean, some options you could think about would be, you know, medium density residential or civic institutional, potentially.
Talking about the whole parcel?
No, I'm talking about the northern part as like a transition. That's just, you know, something that, or you could just keep it the way it is. You know, that's 3 to 6 dwelling units per acre. That's actually not really low density residential by Farragut standards. That's pretty, you know, kind of on the high end, really. That's really all I could think of as maybe a transitional element if you all aren't comfortable with the whole thing being commercial. You know, it's your decision to.
That would be my preference.
Excuse me, sir, what is your preference?
To have a transition rather than the whole parcel being commercial on the amendment to the comprehensive plan. We don't know really what that transition would be. That's kind of what we're, I guess, trying to have a discussion about. It's currently, that yellow area is currently 3 to 6 dwelling units per acre. No, unfortunately, I can't. And the smart board's not working tonight, so it doesn't work.
See where we are on this map. I could tell you where I live if you could tell, if you could show me.
I don't know if this is, maybe this is something that might be a little dangerous.
Our laser off on us?
Does your cursor move, your arrow that you got up there in the left corner, can you move it to point to where you're talking about?
Apologize for that. The system just is not working tonight. As far as the smart board, normally I just write on there and show you where it's at.
You got a big stick you can show us there.
Yeah. Well. It doesn't. I don't think it works on the PowerPoint though. You have to use the smart board.
On point.
Can I ask this gentleman something while you're?
Sure. Yeah.
We own this. I want to know, is everything here? I see.
Could probably put it on this.
I see it here.
I don't know if that'll work.
Is everything in there floodplain? Because we've seen this underwater so many times it's unreal.
So they've done a FEMA floodway. This is your floodway limits, which cannot be developed in.
Yeah, that is.
Your floodplain, you can develop if you're allowed to put fill in there and improve it. As long as you don't add more flow of water into this area.
That's why we're here. We're getting so much water on that property now too.
We couldn't get permits.
But that's malfunctional. Yeah.
That's why I've been.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought you were coming to get my snack.
Okay, where are we talking about?
Yeah, right there.
And this is Union Road.
But you can point with the eagle on the top of the flag. Yeah, I was to turn this around here too. It's right here.
He showed me.
Okay, cool.
I do understand that.
You okay?
Damn technology. It's not working. I need it to. A comment, sir? Guys up there.
My plantar fascia has been hurting my heel ever since I showed up, so I don't really want to be standing. My name is Wayne Albaugh. I live in Pony Express Drive in the Old Stage Hill subdivision. and I'm going to throw another wrinkle at you, and I'm going to be real quick about it because I know y'all want to go home. Have no problem with everything that's being discussed about the property. If you're going to put a supermarket in there, retail shops, or whatever was shown in that little drawing, that's cool. But what you've got to consider, and what I'd like for you to consider, please, I think you have, and I hope you will look at it again, is on the north side of this proposed property, whatever it ends up being, you have Saddle Ridge, Fox Run, Camden Grove, Andover Place, and everything, whatever's up North Everett Road. I haven't been up there in a while. All those folks can access that supermarket without ever touching Kingston Pike. But south of that, you've got Bridgemore, Fort West, Rockwell Farms, the Reserve of Farragut, Steeplechase, and McPhee Manor, and you know where they're going to go through to get to the supermarket? Old Stage Hills. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
My name is Doug Bowles. I live at 12608 Union Road. We have a corner lot right here. We also own a small parcel next to it. And the gentleman just told me, what I had thought was floodplain, which we've seen it underwater so many times it's unreal. If anybody lives there, sir, I know you do, you've seen it. The gentleman just told me that he could bring up the ground there and make that, put a business there. Commercial is just what you said. If you put more land, more dirt here, guess where it's going to go? On us. We've already got rivers running through our backyard now. I understand he said he got a retention pond. That's okay if it actually did the job, and we don't want to see a business in our backyard either any more than you do. We were under opinion that every bit of that was floodplain, and it could never be built on. You know, I guess things have changed. Have they?
Well, and I guess, John, you can correct me if I'm wrong, probably about 10 acres of it is in the floodplain. Is that roughly something like that? And all that wouldn't really be affected.
What he showed me was, can I show you? No, I could show you on this map, like I just asked him. So.
Well, I mean, yeah, we can.
Sorry, there's a small high piece on the northeastern quadrant. It's kind of out of the way on the other side of the creek. It does part of the C1 zoning. Right now, we have no intended use for that area. It's very unlikely.
Yeah, but we're talking about this now again,
Yeah,
right?
that's what I'm referring to.
Yeah, probably
Right
the east.
Well, that's about how many acres there you're calling?
It's probably about 5 acres.
5 or 6 acres right there. Can we have an assurance you're not going to do anything there?
That's floodplain.
That's why I'm asking.
It is floodplain.
Yes, sir. That's what I'm asking you. But you said you can bring in dirt.
We can try to permit up to the floodway. We got a permit for it, but
Let me
my intentions is from here on.
Yes, sir.
No, it is true. There are some things you can do in the flood fringe. In the floodplain, you've got the floodway, which is basically a no-touch area.
That's correct.
But then you have beyond the floodway an area called the flood fringe.
This is a flood fringe.
Now, in the flood fringe, you theoretically you'd have to do the analysis, and then it would have to come before the planning commission and all that as part of a plans prepared by an engineer and surveyor. But there is some fill that you can do in the flood fringe area. It's up to 50% of the area between the edge of the fringe and the floodway. That would be the absolute maximum. That doesn't mean you could do that high percentage.
But what we would do, they won't allow us to add more volume or flood someone else a permit of this property. It's permitting wise, you can't make it happen. We can't add extra flooding to anyone permitting this property, nor into the volume of this creek.
But if you brought in dirt here, where's the water going to go?
We would shed it this way into the creek, but we would have to retain it and not allow any additional level of service of water going into the creek.
Okay, if water comes through here, this is where we live. How are you going to get that water?
We have to capture it and retain it on site. They will make us.
But one of the things related to this discussion is on the future land use map, that eastern area is shown as open space. And the staff, of course, we wouldn't support changing that designation. And, that's basically
Is he saying this?
the
now?
floodplain area.
Yeah, he's talking about this right here.
Okay. That still didn't answer what my question was, really.
Okay.
The way you're showing me that he could bring in dirt is what we feel like is going to hurt us. You know, that's the question. And like I said, I could show it to you, sir. You can't see it from there. So I could bring it to you and show you, like.
Yeah,
like
that's
we
fine.
look-
I
like
mean,
we
there
look-
is some fill you can do in the flood fringe area. But that has to all be engineered. You have to show that you have no impact.
Well, in other words, enough money can bring it in there and get it done.
There are certain things that if the correct engineering and surveying's done, that they can do in the flood fringe area only, not the floodway. They can't do anything in that area.
But you have to design it where we don't impact the adjacent landowner.
Well, if you build anything there, you would anyway, so that's kind of two-edged sword there.
Well, I mean, that would have to be part of if that ever became part of a site plan or whatever preliminary plat, that would.
Just have to fight it again.
Well,
We do
you
a
need to
drainage
come
study
out
as
and be, and voice an
That
opinion
also would
about
be
it.
putting more traffic on this road again, too. So
Yes.
that's what I had to say.
I would agree, but any development on that property is going to have to be analyzed for the impacts and mitigated.
Yes, sir.
So it's a matter of what kind and.
Yes, sir. Like I
when.
said, we've lived here, I've lived there 15 years. And we've seen that whole ground underwater so many times, it's unreal. And,
I've seen it too.
all right,
I
that's
don't live
great. I'm
right
glad
there,
you
but
have.
I've
You've
definitely
probably
seen
seen the river run through my backyard then. And I tried to bring in some dirt and they wouldn't let me, so. So how does that work? I wanted to bring it up where the river wouldn't run through my backyard. I was told no.
I can't answer that
No.
question, but that's.
I'm sorry. I'll say it again. I was asked if I could bring in dirt and fill that area up to where the river didn't come through my backyard. And I was told I couldn't do that through the city of Farragut. Now, if he can do it on this and I couldn't do it in my backyard, what's the difference here?
Well, that could have been in the floodway. I don't know the
Well, sir,
situation.
I don't know legal
But-
terms of this either.
Yeah.
I can look at this map and figure out where we live. That's about it.
I mean, I can assure you, whatever we would, require of you, it would be the same as the applicant before you. I mean, they wouldn't be able to do anything you couldn't do.
In an area where you could modify it, you'd have to put together the whole engineered package and have it reviewed by the town and all the permits and what, you'd have to go through the same process that they're going through.
Okay. Thank you.
It's not a matter of you can't and they can.
Well, it's a matter we were told we couldn't,
Matter of they
so I
want to put
guess
some money
that
in
means
to
they
do
can't.
all those other things, and that's a large burden on an individual resident.
Well, excuse me, sir. I'm sorry.
Hey, Mark, don't they have to get approval from the state? Because when we did something in the creek, we had to get approval for the state as well as the town.
That's right.
And, well, FEMA as well, potentially.
That whole process everybody touches it. Yeah.
We just want to watch our property value also, and that's why I'm here.
Now, the discussion is around the land use plan and then the zoning request that would follow from that. And, I'm hearing, I think, at least, I know Ron and I have talked about the 2/3, 1/3 concept, commercial in the front, we're interested in a transition. Maybe Mark, if you want to look at something other than what's there, to me, it's what it is on the back third, unless there's, something you want to come back to us and.
Well, I mean,
Well, I think we want a transitional zoning.
yes, okay. Yeah, I mean, I threw out some options, but.
Kind of what we all want to see, if it comes up for a vote next time. Okay.
Okay, so John, they'll be voting on the amendment request, but, it sounds like the opinion is the brown is okay to maybe go to commercial, but the yellow is probably going to need to either stay yellow or not commercial, something else.
And I would add, if that doesn't, look like it works for you all, we need to give feedback to Mark, and then we'll just leave the land use plan as it is, and I'm sure you, unless you want to go through the rezoning, I mean,
Would you
it's got to
consider-
work for you for us to, I think, follow through with that.
For an assisted living component, would you have considerations for an R6? It doesn't R6 handle for assisted living?
Yeah, you're distinguishing the zoning from the plan, and it's true that assisted living could go in general commercial or PCD or R6.
Would that be a consideration?
But medium density residential is just for residential in the land use plan, which would be the most comparable to R6. You could consider, and I'm just throwing this out there and it's up to the commission on this, is a civic institutional, maybe transition on that yellow area. You do have civic institutional to the west. That's what that kind of bluish gray area is west of the property. That's where the nursing home, some of the churches, that's civic institutional. Perhaps that would be something that could be considered. But beyond that, I don't really know what else I could come up with or suggest for that.
The other factor, Ed, you mentioned if the zoning is tied to widening Union Road all the way down, in addition to that west road that we were discussing to come out to a way station, if it's tied to the widening, that won't work for us, and I don't think it'd work for the Swan family. I mean, just being honest about it. That's why, if that's a condition of the zoning, I don't think that would fly. We wouldn't agree to it, and I'm sure the Swan brothers would probably object, because that would basically relegate their property to a no sale.
Okay.
Because of the cost of that widening and that bridge culvert. Just reality.
Okay, we'll move on to
If you don't mind, in my haste to get done real quick, since I witnessed the discussion of traffic and traffic studies on the apartment proposal for the apartments off of Smith Road and Peterson, I would like to ask, can we do the same thing for what I was talking about? Because a point I didn't make is, if we have a supermarket there, and I'm perfectly fine with that, the problem is, on the north side, everybody can access it without running over one another. But on the south side of Kingston Pike, all those subdivisions, which amounts to about 600 houses, will have to come back east on Old Stage Road to the red light, turn back west, catch the red light at Everett, then catch the proposed red light into the supermarket, and then reverse that when they go back to Fort West. They're not going to do that. They're going to cut through our subdivision.
very familiar with that.
We've been down this path
traditional
before.
problem, and going back to the bollards and.
Yeah, exactly. I knew you were familiar with it. I'm just saying, if we're going to do, how you're zoning and all that, I don't care. I won't say I don't care, but I don't have a dog in that fight. But I can see the traffic going by the front of my house increasing tenfold, or some number. I'm just throwing numbers, so thank you.
The last remaining item is a public hearing on any proposed location for new utilities. Do we have any, Mark?
No, I don't have any. On that rezoning request that the Horn Properties is, one of the things that I don't guess until we make a decision on the comprehensive plan that we really know what to do as far as the rezoning. Is that correct? Okay. So we're going to make a vote on the comprehensive plan next time, and then, I guess that will kind of determine how you want to proceed with the rezoning, because, you won't be able to rezone it all the way to Union as C1, for example, if they don't want to change the comprehensive plan for that northern third. So, is that right?
I mean, how much, what's?
I can't
wrong with
support R6 on Union Road.
I mean, I can put it in an ordinance and make it all C1 and let them act on it at C1 if you want.
Well, minimum level could be to deal with that first 2/3, is change
Yes.
the land use plan, and then deal with the rezoning of
Yeah,
that.
I think that's a
Increment.
reasonable way to do
Unless
it.
they want to, in the meantime, you know, they've got to look at their project and see if you do that, do you have a project?
I think
Isn't
part
that
of the
right?
problem
Isn't that
is they don't know how much acreage that you want to be commercial and how much would be something else is kind of their problem right now, I think, as I
That has-
understand it.
I think where you got to get down to some of the details on the property that y'all are going to have to talk about that. Because I think there's, you know, we're open to a carve out of that roughly 2/3,
Okay.
1/3 concept. What we're interested in is that transition.
Sir, would we be getting a map of the new, like we did for this one, where we can view it also?
Yeah, it'll all be public
It'll be
information.
available
Yeah.
for the next meeting.
This one will sit through the mail. Would I be getting another one through the mail?
I would just watch the agenda advertisements. There will likely be some action taken on this item on April 16th. Is that what it was, the third?
Third Thursday.
So I would, you know, come to that meeting. Just plan on coming to that meeting, April 16th. Here, same time, yep. Mhm. I think that's it, yeah. It's better than I thought.
That was we had more nuances in this meeting than I think we've had in the last 10 years combined. I think you're right. I want to get a, have to give me a medical.